Chapter 4100. Nietion stared at Tang 13. His eyes trembled as he yelled. All 5 hexes activated. He could sense the powerful aura of a primordial azura from the latter's body. The kind of darkness that rushed towards him made him feel an incomparable threat. The 5 hexes of Shura, Hand of Destruction, Wings of Death, Body of Ghost Killer, Forbidden Soul of Mysterious Heaven, not destined. Tang 13 had activated all 5 hexes. Just as he said, his battle with Zhu Wan had only just begun. Tang 13. On the battle stage, Zhu Wan called out his opponent's name word by word. Then, he laughed maniacally. Let's fight to our heart's content. Before, he only saw Tang 13 as an ant that he could kill with a wave of his hand. Even though this ant resisted a few times and surprised him, it was still just an ant. But now, he saw Tang 13 as a true opponent. Apart from Nietion, there was actually another person who could be regarded as a rival. This was simply a matter of great joy. Come! Tang 13 laughed maniacally. He raised his hands, and a destructive aura enveloped the entire battle stage. He promised Nietion that he would do his best to force Zhu Wan to reveal his trump card. Therefore, he would do his best to fight until the end. Boom! In the next moment, the wings of death on Tang 13's back opened. The black wings exuded a suffocating aura of death. He was so fast that his body blurred in the air like a black ray of light. Ghost's left hand. Facing Tang 13's deadly attack, Zhu Wan raised his hand again. Under the influence of the ghost chi, the space around him was in a special state. This is an enchantment. This time, Nietion finally saw it clearly. The moment Zhu Wan raised his hand, he used the ghost chi to open an enchantment. And this barrier actually had the effect of affecting space-time and slowing down the flow of time. This was why Zhu Wan was able to catch Tang 13's attack with his bare hands. Nietion, the power he used is not as simple as an enchantment. However, at that moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out. His expression was gloomy as he said, "The ancestor of all ghosts is definitely your strongest opponent. You must watch the upcoming battle carefully." Yes. Nietion nodded heavily, his eyes shining brightly. At the same time, on the battle stage, Tang 13's ghostly slaughter body penetrated the void. The Xiantian Forbidden Soul released a terrifying spiritual deterrence, forcing Zhu Wan to kill him. Buzz! But when he got close to Zhu Wan, he seemed to be blocked by something. A low rumble sounded in the void, and then his speed suddenly dropped. How is this possible? In the next second, Tang 13 realized something was wrong. Her pupils quivered as she screamed. In an instant, he actually felt waves of terrifying power coming from the surrounding space, pressing down on him from all directions, causing him to feel as if his entire body was being torn apart. What was even stranger was that the power was exactly the same as the aura of his entire body. Understand now. Below the arena, Nietion had similarly noticed something, and he cried out in shock. He saw that Zhu Wan's left hand was shrouded in a strange vortex, which was very difficult to detect. It was rapidly absorbing Tang 13's power. At that moment, he suddenly understood why Zhu Wan was able to use Tang 13's blade to hurt him. The vortex on Zhu Wan's left hand could absorb the opponent's power and make it his own. It seemed that the terrifying thing about Zhu Wan's left hand was not that it could open enchantments, but that it could absorb power. Break for me. At that moment, Tang 13 suddenly roared in a low voice. She suddenly opened her hands, and a destructive aura burst out, forcibly breaking open the enchantment in the surrounding space. Zhu Wan saw this and couldn't help but be surprised. Tang 13's strength and willpower were beyond his expectations. Ghostly right hand. However, he was not in a hurry and slowly raised his right hand. Rumble! Right at this moment, an enormous force appeared, causing the entire martial arts arena to shake as if it was about to collapse. Nietion's eyes trembled, and the shock in his heart was written all over his face. If Zhu Wan's left hand was already so terrifying, how terrifying would his right hand be? At that moment, the surrounding crowd was stunned. Clearly, They did not expect this battle to be so terrifying. It's over. Zhu Wan's low voice sounded from the battle stage. Then, his right hand fell, and majestic and unstoppable power appeared, crashing down on Tang 13's body. Poof! Poof! Tang 13's body froze, but she opened her eyes at that moment. Two blades of I-Force whizzed out, breaking through the air to attack. Zhu Wan immediately sensed the danger. His eyes narrowed, and he quickly retreated with a cry of surprise. Unfortunately, he was one step too slow. The two blades of I-Force hit him in the blink of an eye, leaving two glaring, bloody scars on his face. At the same time, Tang 13's body flew backwards, leaving a trail of blood in the air as she rushed out of the battle stage. When she steadied herself, the crowd looked over and saw that her entire body was a bloody mess. The Eye of Azura, the 5 restrictions of Azura, and the attack from Zhu Wan's right hand were too much for her to bear. Tang 13. Nye Tian looked at the blood-red figure, his eyes trembling. He was deeply moved. How could he not know that Tang 13 had fought until this moment because of him? You deserve to die. Just then, Zhu Wan roared. Ghostly chi erupted from his body, surging out like a tsunami. It was monstrous and shocking. He was the ancestor of all ghosts, but Tang 13 had left two glaring, bloody scars on his face. How could he bear this? All of a sudden, Nye Tian felt an oppressive aura. His expression flickered as he shouted, "Not good! Ghost calamity kill!" In the next moment, Zhu Wan roared like a wild beast. His entire body surged with a completely different aura than before. His entire body was like a wild beast, madly attacking Tang 13. Tang 13 barely managed to stabilize his body, but felt the approaching aura of death. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He had already been knocked out of the battle stage, so he had lost this battle. But Zhu Wan was enraged and wanted to kill him directly. Seeing this, the crowd's eyes trembled violently, and they all exclaimed in unison. No one expected Zhu Wan to be so fierce. Roar! Chapter 41:01. Nye Tian hovered in midair, his two astral souls, the azure dragon and black tortoise, shot out, shaking the entire space. The crowd was dumbfounded. Each and every one of them was dumbfounded. Zhu Wan's sudden attack was already out of their expectations. Nye Tian's attack was even more shocking. Boom! The azure dragon and black tortoise astral souls erupted at the same time, resonating with each other, shaking the entire space. However, the boundless ghostly aura that blotted out the sky was like a tsunami, suppressing and killing everything in its path. Bang! In the blink of an eye, two thunderous booms resounded. The silhouette of the azure dragon and the black tortoise were shattered into pieces. Terrifying shockwaves rippled outwards, spreading in all directions. Seeing this, Nye Tian's eyes trembled with astonishment, and his expression froze. He didn't expect Zhu Wan's strength to be so terrifying. The resonance of the two forbidden astral souls in front of the ghost tribulation was completely useless. In the next instant, the terrifying ghostly aura gushed towards Tang 13. Such a terrifying ghostly aura could possibly separate Tang 13 from the Slaughterwolf astral soul. If that's the case, even if Tang 13 was a star monarch, she wouldn't be able to revive. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He felt a cold breath stuck in his throat, unable to be swallowed nor spit out. Just at this moment of life and death, something strange happened. Wah! In the air, a powerful force appeared, descending from the sky. Momentarily, the sky changed color, as if it was covered by a layer of frost. Following that, a strange scene appeared. Crack, crack, crack. Everywhere the force passed, time and space froze. Even the ghostly aura was frozen solid. The crowd was stunned by the scene before them. They all drew in a breath of cold air as their expressions froze. Who would have thought that a third person would make a move? It's him. Nye Tian lifted his head, staring at the silhouette in the air. He couldn't help but frown, his face filled with shock. He didn't think that Zhu Shi would make a move at this moment. Zhuwan's silhouette stiffened as he hovered in the air. His eyes were like sharp blades, locked onto Zhu Shi. Everyone's eyes trembled. They had not expected that Zhu Shi would actually make a move. You have already won, so why take another's life? Zhu Shi's face was stern as he looked at Zhuwan from afar. A mere ancestral dragon dares to teach me a lesson? Zhuwan sneered, his eyes filled with arrogance. Zhu Shi frowned. He was clearly surprised that Zhuwan could tell that he had the ancestral dragon physique at a glance. Zhuwan, you've already won. This battle ends here. At this time, Nie Tian's silhouette flickered and he appeared beside Tang 13. Looking at Zhuwan, he said, "If you still want to fight, I, Nie Tian, will accompany you to the end." Umph. With a cold laugh, Zhuwan seemed much calmer than before as he said in a deep voice, "Nie Tian, our duel will begin soon. Don't worry." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and leaped off the arena. The storm ended just like that. Thanks. Staring at Zhuwan's back, Nie Tian's face was extremely dark. Then, he turned around to Zhu Shi and sincerely thanked him. If Zhu Shi didn't make a move, Tang 13 would have died for sure. She would have died completely. I look forward to fighting against you. Zhu Shi's eyes flickered, and he spoke in a low voice. Then, in a flash, he disappeared. Nie Tian frowned. Why does everyone want to fight against me? Tang 13, are you okay? Then, he looked at Tang 13 and asked anxiously. I survived. Tang 13 exhaled deeply. Her face was white as a sheet, but the sharpness in her eyes never faded. You shouldn't have angered him. Nie Tian shook his head and bitterly smiled. What happened just now was far too dangerous. Nie Tian, you have the confidence to defeat him, right? Tang 13 chuckled and asked. No. Nie Tian once again bitterly smiled and shook his head. Even though he had seen Tang 13 fight against Zhuwan and understood the latter's capabilities, he still wasn't confident. Zhuwan was far too terrifying. He was even more of a threat than Zhu Shi. Tang 13 frowned, but didn't say anything. This was the first time he'd seen Nie Tian's lack of confidence. The Nie Tian of the past, no matter who he faced, has never felt this uneasy. It wasn't that Nie Tian's confidence had weakened. It was that Zhuwan was far too terrifying. Tang 13 didn't know much about Zhuwan, but from a battle just now, he could tell that Zhuwan was no ordinary warrior. His real identity must be terrifying. Zhuwan defeated Tang 13 with absolute superiority and successfully entered the finals of the Hidden Dragon. Next was the duel between Nie Tian and Xiao Wanjie, the Devil's Son. Nie Tian, don't tell me you don't have the confidence to defeat this guy? Tang 13 glanced over to Nie Tian and chuckled. If I can't even defeat him, then I should pack up and go home. Nie Tian smiled as well. His eyes were full of confidence. Though Xiao Wan was scary, he wasn't scary enough to scare him. Against Xiao Wan, Nie Tian had great confidence. Nie Tian's silhouette flashed. Like a sharp sword, he landed on top of the battle ring. His entire body emitted a sharp energy that engulfed the entire battle ring. At the same time, Xiao Wan's silhouette appeared as well. Like a mountain, he descended and the space around him rumbled. The crowd stared at the two silhouettes, their eyes shaking. This is the second battle of the top four. I wonder who will win the battle between the two of them. I think Xiao Wan is better. Though he lost to Nie Tian before, he is the second-ranked warrior in the Hidden Sky continent. His capabilities and reputation are not something Nie Tian can compare to. Reputation is useless. Up until now, Nie Tian has only lost to Zhu Shi. Who knows how strong he really is? Everyone discussed. It was obvious that they did not agree on the result of this battle. Xiao Wanjie's capabilities and reputation were greater, but Nie Tian's recent performance was far too eye-catching. Those with sharp eyes could see his terrifying potential. Nie Tian, you have surprised the demonic sun by making it this far. Just then, Xiao Wanjie, who was standing on top of the battle ring, spoke. His eyes stared at Nie Tian. His eyes were cold and full of murderous intent. Nie Tianling snickered. Your Highness, it's too early to be surprised. It won't be too late to be surprised when you lose to me. Chapter 4102. Boom! On the arena, Xiao Wanjia's aura exploded like a tsunami, forming a terrifying whirlpool of ghost qi in the air. What a powerful aura! Nie Tian frowned as he sensed the terrifying aura in the air. He was shocked. Xiao Wanjia's strength was much stronger than a few days ago. The ghost qi around him was as violent as thunder, shaking the air. Nie Tian, I won't give you the slightest chance this time. In the next moment, Xiao Wanjia let out a low roar and took a step forward. Terrifying ghost qi rumbled as a terrifyingly sharp black claw appeared out of nowhere and slammed down towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he saw the space around him being torn apart. It was obvious that Xiao Wanjia had attacked with all his strength, vowing to kill Nie Tian. Godfiend body, activate. Nie Tian's expression changed. The Godfiend force in his body surged, and he activated the Godfiend body. If he still held back against an expert like Xiao Wanjia, he would be digging his own grave. With the appearance of Godfiend inscriptions, Nie Tian's aura surged violently, as if it was going to break through the restrictions of time and space. Recently, Nie Tian's strength had increased tremendously. However, this was the first time he activated the Godfiend body. He couldn't control the sudden increase in strength. Come on, Nie Tian growled. He took out the sky sword and charged at the terrifying ghost claw in the air. The sword's shadow was as violent as a dragon, killing everything in its path. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow arrived and collided with the ghost claw. There was a muffled sound in the air, and the two forces crumbled at the same time. Nie Tian moved slightly and retreated a few steps. Xiao Wanjia, on the other hand, was rooted like an old tree, unmoved. My cultivation is still too far apart from his. Nie Tian steadied himself and smiled bitterly. The difference in strength between him and Xiao Wanjia was too great. Even if he activated the Fiend God body, he would still be at a disadvantage in a head-on clash. Amen. Xiao Wanjia forced back Nie Tian with a single palm strike. His face revealed not surprise, but shock. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would actually be able to withstand his palm strike head-on. Nie Tian, it looks like you haven't used your true strength in the previous battle. Xiao Wanjia smiled coldly, his eyes revealing a cold, killing intent. Xiao Wanjia, didn't you also hide your strength? Nie Tian replied with a faint smile. The aura around his body actually continued to rise explosively. Kill! Xiao Wanjia's eyes darkened, and he roared like a beast. His figure was like a terrifying black whirlpool as he charged toward Nie Tian. Boom! After which, a thunderous sound rang out in the air as the heavens and earth trembled. A storm of ghostly qi appeared, like a gigantic beast that wanted to devour everything. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and his expression suddenly changed. Xiao Wanjia was truly going all out this time, not holding anything back. Reversal of yin and yang. In an instant, he reacted. The sword in the sky was like a dragon that wanted to devour the sky. It howled and pierced forward. The shadow of the sword was filled with murderous intent, and the power of reversal of yin and yang was revealed. Bang! Then, the two terrifying forces collided. Immediately, a terrifying explosion occurred in the air, as if the heavens and earth were about to explode. Hiss, 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 bang, bang, bang. Then the two forces were like two gigantic beasts that wrestled with each other, penetrated each other, collided, merged, and devoured each other. Under the impact of the rolling waves, Nie Tian and Xiao Wanjia's silhouettes were already submerged. These two are too terrifying. Everyone's eyes were shaking uncontrollably, and their expressions were full of shock. They already knew that Nie Tian and Xiao Wanjia were geniuses among geniuses, but when they actually saw the battle between the two, they still found it hard to believe. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they would find it hard to believe that this was a battle between two young cultivators. Nie Tian, don't disappoint me. Zhu Wanjia stood high in the sky and watched the battle stage from afar. The corner of his lips curled into a cold smile. What he was looking forward to was the battle against Nie Tian. If Nie Tian was defeated by Xiao Wanjia, then this hidden dragon battle would be far too boring. Qi, Tang 13, and the others watched the battle stage with trembling eyes. It was obvious that they were very nervous. Die. Just then, a loud roar came from the sky. Then, a black wave of ghostly energy appeared. Like a sharp blade, it tore through the sky. Bang! Next, a muffled sound arose. Then, a red silhouette was flung out. It was Nietian. Nietian. Qi and the others were shocked by the scene before them. It's Nietian, he's injured. Everyone's expression changed as they screamed. It seemed that Nietian's strength was not as strong as Xiao Wanjie. But just then, a pair of starlight wings appeared on Nietian's back, allowing him to hover steadily in the air. His body shook, and the blood stains on his body were washed away. His entire person regained its sharpness. The crowd trembled at the sight of this. It seemed that the near-fatal injury to them did not affect Nietian at all. Nietian, you are indeed strong. But this battle, you will lose for sure. High above the battle stage, Xiao Wanjie's voice resounded. Then, waves of ghostly energy rushed over like a giant beast in a tsunami. Nietian frowned slightly. A strange expression appeared on his face. He simply couldn't believe it. At this moment, he actually felt a strange aura again. This aura triggered a resonance within his body, causing his martial body to slowly approach its limit. It's that energy again. His eyes trembled and his heart was filled with shock. Earlier, he had already felt the same energy. It was this energy that helped him activate the 9 universe limits, allowing him to successfully comprehend the 7th universe limit, the inverse yin-yang. At that time, he felt that this energy was most likely related to the mysterious 9th universe messenger. He never thought that this energy would reappear at this moment. What's wrong with Nietian? Everyone saw that Nietian was in a daze. They couldn't help but yell, unsure of what was happening. You're courting death. Xiao Wanjie's expression turned fierce as he growled. To lose focus at a moment of life and death was suicide. Boom! Instantly, a terrifying ghostly energy filled the air, blotting out the sky and covering the earth, destroying everything in its path. 9 universe limits, 8th universe limit, change of heaven and earth. But at this moment, Nietian raised the sword in his hand. Instantly, a sword aura that could reverse the heavens and earth erupted. The surrounding void rumbled endlessly. In an instant, Xiao Wanjie suddenly felt the terrifying pressure of the sword aura. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Chapter 4103. Boom! The void around the martial stage rumbled endlessly. It was as if there were thousands of lightning beasts hiding in the sky, ready to explode and devour the entire world. The crowd's expressions were fiery and excited. They were shocked by the battle in front of them. No one expected that Nietian's body contained such a terrifying power. Boom! At this moment, the sword image was like a gigantic dragon from the abyss, slamming into the boundless waves of ghost qi. A thunderous boom rang out in the air as the entire heaven and earth trembled, after which a boundless amount of energy exploded forth, transforming into waves of qi that frenziedly spread out in all directions, enveloping the entire area. At that moment, Nietian's body trembled slightly. He retreated hundreds of meters before he managed to stabilize his body. His arm was bleeding profusely, his wrist was broken, and he couldn't even hold the sky sword anymore. Even though the huge sword aura had the power to soar into the sky, it was no match for Xiao Wanjie's terrifying ghost energy. Change of heaven and earth. Reversal of heaven and earth. But at that moment, Nietian's eyes weren't filled with fear and horror. Instead, they were filled with shock and confusion. Just now, a majestic voice suddenly rang in his divine sense, startling him for a moment. But that voice disappeared in an instant, as if it had never existed. What happened just now? Nietian frowned and looked inside his body, but he didn't find anything unusual. It's still the same aura. His face sank slightly, and he forced himself to calm down. That mysterious aura appeared twice, and helped him unlock the 7th and 8th of the 9 limits of starry sky. It was obvious that there was an expert hiding in the void, watching him in the dark. Could this mysterious expert be the 9th starry sky messenger? Nyetian, let's see how long you can last. At that moment, Xiao Wanjie roared. The ghost energy around his body surged violently, and he charged toward Nyetian again. Nyetian wasn't afraid in the slightest. He gripped the sword in his hand tightly, and the wound on his wrist healed in an instant. Then, he took a step forward and stabbed out with his sword. 10,000 sword images appeared in the air, and he forcefully resisted the 10,000 tribulations. Bang, bang, bang. 2 terrifying forces collided, and a series of explosive sounds came from the void. The surrounding space-time directly fell into chaos, drowning Nyetian and Xiao Wanjie's figures. The crowd stared at the sky with trembling faces. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. The battle in front of them had far exceeded their expectations, especially the super strength that Nyetian had displayed. It was simply too terrifying. In the sky above the battle stage, the figures of Nyetian and Xiao Wanjie could no longer be seen. One could only see surges of surging ghostly qi and sword shadows with killing intent. The battle between Nyetian and Xiao Wanjie had already reached its climax. After a long time, the chaotic time-space finally calmed down. 2 blood-soaked figures appeared high up in the sky. They were Nyetian and Xiao Wanjie. Nya Tianling stood high up in the sky. His aura was as sharp as a sword, piercing through the heavens. The ghostly qi around Xiao Wanjie was terrifying and surging, like a demon god. These 2 fellows are too terrifying. They can actually maintain such a state in a battle of this level. The crowd stared at the 2 people in the sky, and their eyes couldn't help but tremble in shock. Nyetian and Xiao Wanjie had fought for so long, but they actually didn't suffer any heavy injuries. This battle seemed to be going on for a long time. Nyetian, this devil son didn't think that you could actually last until now. The ghostly qi around Xiao Wanjie's body was incomparably violent. His eyes stared fixedly at Nyetian. His gaze was cold and murderous, as if he wanted to skin the latter alive. He originally wanted to defeat Nyetian and preserve some of his strength, but he didn't think that Nyetian could actually last until now. Also didn't expect that you still had some strength left. The corners of Nyetian's mouth twitched, as a mocking smile appeared on his face. Xiao Wanjie laughed coldly. How can this devil son's strength be something you can guess? As the sound of his voice faded, he took a step forward. Instantly, ghostly qi violently gushed forth as a terrifying, deathly aura gushed forth, permeating the entire arena. Yet Nyetian wasn't afraid at all. He tightened his grip on the long sword in his hand as his eyes gleamed with killing intent. His entire person was incomparably sharp, and at this moment, Xiao Wanjie slammed his palm downwards. Instantly, countless rays of black light appeared in the air, exploding apart like a ball of fire. The rays of black light connected together, enveloping the entire arena. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back as he frantically retreated. How much strength does this fellow have left? He steadied himself as he silently mused. After such a long battle, Xiao Wanjie's strength didn't weaken in the slightest. In fact, it was getting stronger and stronger. This caused Nyetian to be extremely puzzled. Nyetian, you have to end this battle as soon as possible. The martial art this fellow cultivates is extremely bizarre. He can unceasingly devour energy. If this battle drags on, it won't be beneficial to you. The fat cat's voice rang out. MHM. Nyetian nodded his head. He knew that Xiao Wanjie still had the night elephant hidden within his body. Hence, he had to defeat the latter in a single move. If not, the latter would be angered and release the night elephant, and that would be troublesome. Although Nyetian wasn't afraid of the night elephant, once it appeared, there was a high possibility that the 9-level chaos beast would be attracted. That would attract uninvited guests. Zhu Wan stood in the air, watching the battle on the arena. His eyes shone with a bright light. as though he was anticipating something. Nietian, you're dead for sure. In the air, Xiao Wanjie roared in anger. Ghostly chi surged around his body, and every move he made shook the heavens and earth. Nietian's figure moved erratically, avoiding Xiao Wanjie's direct confrontation. Change of heaven and earth. 9 swords, open array. At that moment, that voice rang out in his mind again, and he couldn't help but be stunned. In the next instant, an image flashed across his mind. In empty space, 9 swords appeared like 9 raging dragons. They moved in unison and instantly tore through the void. The sudden scene made Nietian frown, and his face was filled with astonishment. Nietian, use the arena in front of you as the array formation. Gather the 9 swords and open the real change of heaven and earth. Just as he was puzzled, the fat cat's voice rang out excitedly. At that moment, Nietian finally understood. He agreed and raised his sword to the sky. The sound of the sword roared, and suddenly, a sword shadow appeared. It was like a mountain that stood in the sky. When Xiao Wanjie saw this scene, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He didn't know what Nietian was doing, but his killing intent was already set, and he didn't give Nietian any chance. He slapped out with his palm, and a terrifying palm shadow rushed towards Nietian. The wings on Nietian's back flapped, and he slapped out with his palm. The Earth Extermination Astral Soul appeared, and he forcefully blocked Xiao Wanjie's palm. After that, his figure moved again. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he swept past the arena, leaving behind sword shadows that surrounded the entire arena like giant stone pillars. Chapter 4104. Xiao Wanjie stared at the 9 sword silhouettes, and his eyes trembled. He had a bad premonition, but he was still incomparably arrogant. He growled, Nietian, no matter how many tricks you have, you must die today. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Wanjie slammed his palm forward. Instantly, an enormous amount of ghost energy rushed towards Nietian like a giant wave. Tianling stood in the sky and stared at the sword silhouettes around him. There was no fear in his eyes. There was a hint of playfulness. At this moment, he completely understood the meaning of the transformation of heaven and earth and the 9 swords array. The 8th limit of the universe, the transformation of heaven and earth, could gather sword intent and not disperse. The true meaning of the transformation of heaven and earth was to gather sword intent and activate an array. Then, the sword intent inside the array would unleash an unimaginable amount of power and reverse the universe. The 9 sword silhouettes that Nietian created earlier, of course, weren't for the purpose of deterrence. Rather, it was to activate a sword array. The 9 sword silhouettes already contained a terrifying amount of power. Under the support of the array, the power of the 9 sword silhouettes increased by several times or even dozens of times. The power of the 9 sword silhouettes was unimaginable. Xiao Wanjie, you have no chance. The corner of Nietian's lips curled up into a cold smile. He stepped forward and raised a sword in the sky. Instantly, an enormous amount of sword intent shot up to the sky, causing the surrounding space to rumble. Boom, boom, boom. In the next second, the 9 sword silhouettes resonated and moved in unison. The momentum of a giant dragon soared to the sky and destroyed everything. Boom! Just then, the enormous palm silhouette, under the attack of the 9 sword silhouettes, crumbled. Seeing this, Xiao Wanjie's eyes widened in shock. He screamed and couldn't say anything else. Transformation of heaven and earth reversed the universe. At the same time, Nietian's figure soared into the sky, and his majestic voice exploded like a clap of thunder. Instantly, the 9 sword images actually condensed in the sky, and a boundless sword aura was formed. The surrounding space rumbled incessantly, and it seemed as if the heavens and the earth were about to collapse. It was like a collapse. Boom! Then, the gigantic shadow of the sword fell, destroying everything in its path. Xiao Wanjie's pupils suddenly constricted, and before he could even react, his figure was directly struck by the sword's shadow and sent flying. Like a kite with its string cut, he fell from the sky, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. This suffocating scene caused everyone's eyes to shake violently. The entire vast cloud plaza was deathly silent. Only the violent energy in the void rumbled endlessly. How? How is this possible? After a long time, someone finally reacted. However, the shock in their eyes was still unconcealable. No one could have imagined that the power that Nie Tian erupted with in an instant was so terrifying that it directly defeated Xiao Wanjie. Qing Chi stared at Nie Tian in the sky with a face full of shock. His lips trembled slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't. He didn't expect that Nie Tian could actually comprehend the true essence of Qian Kuan transformation and defeat Xiao Wanjie with 9 swords. Previously, when Nie Tian activated the 7th level, he was already feeling uneasy. Now that Nie Tian had comprehended the 8th level, Qian Kuan transformation, he panicked even more. Could it be that guy is really here? Qing Chi's expression shifted rapidly. There was an indescribable sense of panic and uneasiness in his heart. He had a feeling that something big was about to happen. Tang 13 stared at Nie Tian with a face full of joy. She didn't expect Nie Tian to end his battle against Xiao Wanjie in such a manner. Nie Tian's body seemed to contain an infinite amount of potential, as if there was no limit to it. At this moment, Nie Tian's figure moved. He slowly took a step forward. A trace of blood leaked out from the corner of his mouth, and his face instantly turned pale. The power of Qian Kuan transformation and the 9-sword array was indeed strong, but also put a great deal of pressure on Nie Tian's martial body. He was currently seriously injured. Nie Tian, he's also injured. Everyone stared at Nie Tian in shock. At this moment, everyone could see that Nie Tian, who had defeated Xiao Wanjie, was also injured by the powerful force. But now, Nie Tian still had to continue his battle against the even more terrifying Zhu Wan. Based on the strength Nie Tian had displayed so far, even at peak condition, he might not be able to defeat Zhu Wan. Now that he was seriously injured, did he still have the strength to fight Zhu Wan? Although Nie Tian's face was pale, his eyes were filled with determination. After stepping off the battle stage, he took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Nie Tian, you really didn't disappoint me. In the distant void, Zhu Wan said in a deep voice. His voice reached Nie Tian's ears, and he sneered. But now, what qualifications do you have to fight me? Ancestor of all ghosts, the battle between us hasn't even started. Underestimating your opponent too early is your biggest mistake. Nie Tian suddenly turned around. His eyes were like sharp blades, cold and staring at Zhu Wan as he transmitted his voice. Umph. Zhu Wan sneered and looked at Nie Tian playfully. Nie Tian, your strength is far from Dong Wangjingrong's, but your character is exactly the same as his. You're both so annoying. Aren't you just as annoying? Nie Tianlong replied with a smile. Since you and I both hate each other, let's wait for the next battle. The corner of Zhu Wan's mouth twitched. He could no longer control the killing intent in his eyes. He was like a ferocious beast that wanted to devour someone. Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed, and he didn't say anything else. Next, he had half a day to rest. He needed to hurry up and recover from his injuries. Soon, half a day passed. Nie Tian stood up. His aura had recovered a lot, but his face was still a little pale. Everyone looked at Nie Tian in shock. This guy is too scary. In such a short time, he's almost recovered. His martial body is too strong. It's infuriating. I really did not expect that in this hidden dragon struggle, the ones who reached the final battle would actually be 2 completely unknown cultivators. I wonder who will have the last laugh in this battle. That guy called Zhu Wan is even scarier than Xiao Wanjie. Nie Tian's injuries haven't healed yet. I think it's going to be difficult. The crowd discussed and looked at Nie Tian with a trace of sympathy. Nie Tian heard the crowd's discussion, but he didn't care. He took a step forward and landed on the battle stage like a dragon. Almost at the same time, Zhu Wan's silhouette appeared as well. His evil eyes flickered and cold locked on Nie Tian's body. Nietian, you and I are finally going to fight. Zhu Wan's eyes were hot and gloomy. There was a trace of madness in his excitement. He looked at Nietian and said in a deep voice. He had been suppressed by Dong Wang, Zhengrong his whole life. He hated the latter to the bone. Chapter 4105. It seems that you have the same determination as me for this battle. On the arena, Nietian looked at Zhu Wan and could feel the tenacity and determination in the latter's eyes. He could not help but smile coldly as he spoke in a low voice. Zhu Wan hated him to the bone, so he had to win, and he had to get the title of Martial Chief of the 5 Academies, so he was also determined to win this battle. The two heaven-defying martial geniuses were going to fight to the death. The excitement of this battle was absolutely beyond imagination. Zhu Wan stared at Nietian, the corner of his mouth twitching as he said word by word. Nietian, between you and me, only one of us can walk out of the arena alive today. Nietian's mouth twitched coldly as he said in a low voice, I will definitely stand until the end. You are the same as Dong Wang Zhengrong, equally confident, equally disgusting. Zhu Wan's eyes were incomparably cold, a strange ghostly aura surrounding him as he sneered. Unfortunately, you do not have his strength. I am not Senior Dong Wang, and you are not the ancestor of all ghosts. Nietian's eyes were incomparably cold as he said in a low voice. So the outcome of this battle between us is unknown. Humph. Zhu Wan smiled coldly and said in a low voice, Nietian, you have to lose this battle. You have no idea what this battle represents. The moment his voice fell, a black vortex appeared outside his body, as if it had a life of its own, spitting out black tongues of fire in the void. Nietian suddenly felt an extremely strange aura and could not help but frown as he exclaimed in surprise. It seemed that in the black vortex, there was some kind of terrifying, devouring power hidden, extremely terrifying. Zhu Wan had not used such power before. Nietian, let me see how much power of the stars is contained in your martial body. Then, Zhu Wan smiled sinisterly and slapped out with his palm. In an instant, the black vortex exploded, turning into terrifying black flames that instantly filled the entire arena. Nietian frantically retreated, immediately activating his astral soul armor. However, the black flames were like maggots in one's bones, forcibly penetrating through the astral soul armor and into his body. Boom! In an instant, Nietian felt as if his body was being attacked by a violent force. His entire body felt as if it was about to combust, and a tearing pain instantly spread throughout his body. The next moment, he couldn't bear the pain that seeped into his bones and marrow, and he screamed. Large beads of sweat seeped out of his forehead, and his face became distorted, looking hideous and terrifying. The terrifying black flames were like wild beasts as they attacked his martial body. They were trying to tear his flesh, bones, and meridians apart. Nietian, this is the myriad ghost flame. At this time, amidst the endless black flames, Zhu Wan's cold laughter rang out. He said in a deep voice, if an ordinary martial artist is invaded by the 10,000 ghost flames, they will instantly die. I want to see how long you, Sacred Lord Star Sky, can last against the flames of 10,000 ghosts. Damn it, Nietian bellowed, his eyes filled with killing intent, as if he were a beast trapped in a cage. Immediately, he released the power of the stars, trying to force out the myriad ghost flames. Boom! However, the moment the power of the stars surged out, the myriad ghost flames became even more violent. The terrifying impact caused countless bloody wounds to appear on his body, and his entire body was bleeding profusely. How is this possible? This horrifying scene caused Nietian to let out a strange cry, and his face went blank for a moment. Releasing the power of the stars had not only failed to force out the myriad ghost flames, but also made it even more violent? Ha! Zhu Wan laughed coldly and said in a low voice, Nietian, with your strength, trying to force out the myriad ghost flames is futile. Nietian's eyes trembled, and traces of blood surged in his eyes. The terror of the myriad ghost flames was beyond his imagination, and he was caught unprepared. In the next moment, he suddenly felt the power of the stars in his body go out of control, and it kept gushing out. What's going on? The sudden change caused him to scream again, and the shock in his heart was written all over his face. Nietian, you must not know. Back then, Dongwang Jingrong almost died under my 1,000 ghost flames. Zhu Wan's figure flickered like a ghost, and he laughed sinisterly. Today, I will first take your star origin stones, and then I will kill you. Ha ha! After saying that, he burst into laughter, and his entire person exuded an aura of madness. Boom, boom, boom. Then, the myriad ghost flames in the void moved, turning into a series of fire snakes that charged towards Nietian. Before Nietian could react, the star soul armor on his body shattered, and the terrifying flames surged into his body. The terrifying pain made Nietian scream again. The moment the black flames entered his body, it was as if every inch of his flesh, blood, and bones were on fire. At this moment, the power of the stars became even more violent, and it was completely out of control. He wants to strip the star origin stones from my body. In an instant, Nietian realized Zhu Wan's intention, and he screamed in his heart. The myriad ghost flames had a special attraction to and devour the power of the stars. Under the influence of the myriad ghost flames, Nietian could not control the power of the stars. Boom, boom, boom. Just as Nietian came to this realization, he suddenly sensed rumbling sounds coming from the starry river. The origin realm formation shook violently, as if it were on the verge of collapse. The terrifying scene shocked him again, and his face was ugly. Nietian, is this all you've got? Is this how you protect the dignity of the star sky holy leader? What a joke. In the dark void, Zhu Wan's low voice sounded, ringing in Nietian's ears like thunder. Dongwang Jingrong was a peak existence in the all-heavens sacred world and had never tasted defeat in 8,000 battles. How glorious was his reputation. But now, when it came to Nietian, he could not even resist the myriad ghost flames. How could the all-ghost ancestor not laugh? The myriad ghost flames, is it? Since I can't force it out, I will devour you. Nietian's eyes trembled slightly, like a wild beast, revealing a fierce light. Boom! In the next instant, the power of the 9,000 demons and the 9 heavenly shackles in his body were released at the same time, like an invisible hand, firmly locked onto the myriad ghost flames. Zhu Wan frowned, suddenly sensing that something was wrong, and his expression changed. He did not expect Nietian to be so fierce that he wanted to forcibly absorb the myriad ghost flames. The myriad ghost flames contain an extremely powerful devouring power. An ordinary martial artist would be burned in an instant. But Nietian wanted to devour the myriad ghost flames, which was undoubtedly a gamble with his life. Chapter 4106. The heavenly Tao shackles forcibly absorbed the flame of 10,000 ghosts and immediately burst into flames. Nietian instantly felt the pain of the flames burning his heart. His face contorted and his entire body trembled uncontrollably. Nietian, with your martial physique, trying to absorb the flame of 10,000 ghosts by force is tantamount to courting death. Zhu Wan's face darkened as he let out a strange cry. His silhouette flickered, and he directly struck out with his palm. A terrifying palm shadow pressed down on Nietian, surging with killing intent. The crowd trembled as they watched the scene unfold on the arena. The entire arena was enveloped by the flame of 10,000 ghosts, making it impossible to see Nietian and Zhu Wan's silhouettes clearly. However, they could vaguely see the shadow of a palm descending on the arena. That kind of earth-shattering momentum caused the hearts of the crowd to tremble. Could it be that this palm would end the battle as soon as it descended? On the arena, the palm shadow was like a mountain directly smashing down on Nietian. Nietian's body trembled uncontrollably as he felt the pressure bearing down on him, as if it wanted to directly crush him. But at this moment, A majestic aura as vast as the ocean suddenly erupted from his body. After that, he stabbed out with the sword in his hand. Sword light shone brilliantly, as resplendent as the sun and moon. The instant the sword shadow whizzed out, the surrounding space abruptly rumbled. Boom! In the next instant, the sword shadows might spread out like the roar of a giant beast, majestically rushing out. Bang! The palm and sword collided, causing a deafening explosion in the void. Boundless waves of energy surged out in all directions. Nietion's silhouette retreated a few hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. On the other side, Zhuan only swayed slightly, but his expression was one of astonishment and anger. He had never imagined that Nietion's current aura would be so much stronger than before. With a single sword strike, he blocked his palm strike. Could it be that Nietion had really devoured the flame of 10,000 ghosts? Zhuan's eyes burned with anger as he looked at Nietion from afar. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He actually discovered that the aura around Nietion's body was continuously increasing. How could this be? Then, Zhuan discovered that Nietion was like a giant black hole, madly devouring his 10,000 ghost flames. A mere flame of 10,000 ghosts isn't enough to kill me. At that moment, Nietion let out a furious roar and shot up into the sky. Like a sharp sword, he stood tall in the sky, emanating a sharp aura that seemed capable of ripping apart everything in its path. Nietion, I never imagined that you would actually be able to devour the 10,000 ghost flames. Zhuan understood. His eyes were extremely gloomy, but he did not panic at all. On the contrary, he laughed wildly, and there was an indescribable excitement in his battle intent. This is just right. It's worth it for me to go all out. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and a ball of ghostly energy appeared in his hands. A terrifying aura filled the air, and it contained the aura of death. After that, it slowly condensed into a black spear. It was his weapon, the ghost dragon. Nietion steadied himself, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Just now, he had indeed devoured the flame of 10,000 ghosts, and his aura had skyrocketed precisely because the heavenly Tao shackles had devoured the flame of 10,000 ghosts, and the heavenly Tao runes had been continuously unsealed. There were 9 heavenly Tao shackles in his body, and on each shackle, there were 3,000 heavenly Tao runes. Previously, there were only 3 heavenly Tao runes on the heavenly Tao shackles, but after devouring the flame of 10,000 ghosts, there were 99 heavenly Tao runes on the heavenly Tao shackles. And under the impact of the heavenly Tao shackles, his cultivation had also broken through from heavenly Tao shackles to heavenly Tao shackles. Although the flame of 10,000 ghosts was ferocious, it was still forcibly absorbed by the heavenly Tao shackles under the pressure of the fiend god power. This was probably something that Zhuan had never dreamed of. But at this moment, Zhuan brandished the demon spear, the ghost dragon. The aura on the spear was extremely terrifying, as if it could cover the sky. Nietion, this is the first time I've used the ghost dragon since I left the Tianxing Mountains. Zhuan's eyes were dark and terrifying, revealing a sinister, murderous intent. He said, back then, when I fought with Dongwang Jingrong, I also used the ghost dragon. That battle left a crack in my ghost dragon. After so many years, I've always not repaired the ghost dragon. I didn't repair the spectral dragon because I wanted to remind myself not to forget the humiliation of my defeat. Today, I'll use the ghost dragon to fight with you, to repay Dongwang Jingrong. If I win this battle, I'll repair the ghost dragon. If I lose, I'll destroy the ghost dragon. As soon as he finished speaking, the demon spear and ghost dragon swept across the void, and a huge black aura appeared, causing the void to rumble endlessly. Nietion's body swayed a little, and his eyes trembled slightly. The terrifying aura that was released from the terrifying black spear was too terrifying, giving him the illusion that he was being pierced directly. In the next moment, Nietion's expression became determined. The sword in the sky flew across the sky, and the sword aura shot into the sky. Ghost Dragon, armor breaking flame. Zhu Wan's eyes darkened, and he let out a low roar. The ghost dragon spun in the void, causing the surrounding space to tremble incessantly. There were bursts of ghostly cries in the air, and the mournful howls caused one's soul to tremble. Boom! In the next moment, the tip of the ghost dragon's spear emitted a black light and immediately turned into a sharp cone storm, burning with a terrifying black flame, and pressed towards Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he thrust the sword in the sky. The sword's shadow suddenly exploded, and it met the attack head-on. Bang! The moment the spear and the sword collided, the heavens and earth trembled, and dark clouds rolled. A terrifying wave of air swept everything like a beast tide. In an instant, Nietian felt his body suddenly sink, and he immediately flew backwards. While he was still in the air, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He retreated for 1,000 meters before he could stabilize himself. However, his face was extremely ugly. It was not pale white, but rather black. It was as if he had been poisoned. This guy's spear was so domineering. Nietian's eyes darkened, and he was shocked. The spear had always been domineering, and it had the power of a knife and the sharpness of a sword. And Zhu Wan's spear was even more domineering. That unparalleled aura made people feel despair, and they could not help but want to give up resisting. Very good. Up in the sky, Zhu Wan's body was filled with killing intent, and there was arrogance in his coldness. Ghost Chi surged around him, and he was like a demon. The spear just now was enough to kill most warriors in the 5th level of the Heaven's Tribulation. But Nietian was only at the 4th level of heavenly justice, and yet he was able to resist it. This made Zhu Wan's fighting spirit even stronger. Geniuses were all lonely. To have someone who could rival them, even if it was an opponent, was also a kind of gratification. Again, Nietian's eyes darkened, and he growled. The demon inscription on his body became even more profound, especially on his face. It was like a brand, and it made him look extremely evil. Chapter 4107. What two terrifying people! The crowd was extremely shocked, and their expressions trembled incessantly as they cried out in alarm. They could not see Nietian and Zhu Wan at all. All they could see were two gigantic dragons rushing towards them. Their auras were so strong that they seemed to have the power to destroy everything. Qing Qi, Tang 13, and the rest looked up into the sky. Their eyes trembled as they held their breaths. They were nervous. The fact that Nietian could make it this far had exceeded most people's expectations. Since Nietian had already made it this far, it would be a pity if he could not take another step forward and defeat the martial leader of the 5 houses. Bang! At this moment, the two dragons collided head-on. A muffled explosion was heard in the sky, as if two mountains had collided. The moment the powerful aura exploded, it formed a horrifying wave of air that swept in all directions. Nietian's body trembled slightly, and he was sent flying again. Blood Chi surged in all directions, but he steadied himself and gripped his sword even tighter. The murderous intent in his eyes intensified. Zhu Wan was too terrifying. Every thrust of his spear had the power to split mountains. Even with the celestial demon body, Nietian could not withstand it. Nietian, how many more spear strikes can you take? Zhu Wan's body was like a mountain, unmoving. His eyes emitted layers of ghostly aura, and a suffocating pressure filled the entire arena. The fact that Nietian could last until now had already exceeded his expectations. He was well aware of how much of an advantage he had in this battle against Nietian. If he were at the same cultivation base as Nietian, he would probably be beaten to a pulp by Nietian. Back when he fought against Dongwang Zhengrong many times, the latter's cultivation level was almost on par with his. It was already terrifying that Nietian could last until now when he was far weaker than him. For the first time, Zhu Wan felt that Nietian was a more terrifying opponent than Dongwang Zhengrong. I will protect the dignity of the Star Saint at all costs. Nietian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His entire body was brimming with battle intent. His eyes seemed to be burning with fire as he said in a domineering manner, "Therefore, I must win this battle." As soon as he finished speaking, he moved. The cry of the sword was like the cry of a crane in the sky. In the void, countless sword shadows whistled out, condensing into a sword net in the air, shooting out horizontally to attack Zuwan. "Courting death," Zuwan said coldly. The spear in his hand swept out, spear intent piercing through the air. A terrifying black blade appeared, piercing through the air. Pooh! In the next moment, Nietion's body trembled. His shoulder had been pierced, and half of his body was bleeding profusely. "Ghost dragon, devour the heavens." At this moment, Zuwan roared. The ghost dragon stirred wildly in the void, and the dark clouds in the surroundings surged like killing intent. They condensed into an incomparably huge dragon that opened its huge mouth and rushed over to devour. Nietion could feel the immense pressure pressing down on him as his eyes trembled. Next, the blood chi in his body erupted forth, fusing together with his celestial and demonic energy. A sword aura gushed forth as a terrifying sword shadow pierced through the air, clashing head-on against the gigantic dragon. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. But the moment the sword shadow collided with the gigantic dragon, it collapsed and was instantly torn apart. Nietion's figure shook once again as he was smashed down, landing heavily on the arena, causing the entire arena to shake as if it was about to collapse. Nietion. When the crowd saw Nietion's figure appear, their eyes trembled violently as they exclaimed, "He's going to lose." Then, when the crowd saw Nietion's body covered in blood, as if he could not hold on any longer, they immediately shouted, "Is he really going to lose?" Ching Chi's eyes narrowed, his face pale, and his body drenched in cold sweat. Of course, he knew that this battle was of utmost importance to Nietion, and he could not lose. But looking at Nietion's current state, it seemed that he could not hold on any longer. Nietion's figure stood coldly on the arena, his body dripping with blood. Even the hand holding the sky sword was trembling, as if he could not hold the sword. But he still stood, as steady as a mountain, as sharp as a sword. "Nietion, it's all over. Die obediently." Zuwan's voice came from high up in the sky, harsh and harsh. "I've said it before, I must win this battle." But at this moment, Nietion suddenly raised his head, his eyes bloodshot and dark, looking extremely terrifying. And as soon as his voice fell, a shocking scene occurred. Boom! 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 Within his body, heavenly shackles surged out, and then like long snakes, they wrapped around his body tightly, penetrating deeply into his flesh, making him look much more majestic. What is he doing?" When the crowd saw this scene, they could not help but exclaim, not knowing what Nietion was doing. Nietion's action did not seem to be a battle, but a self-mutilation. When Ching Chi saw this scene, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. He could tell that the heavenly Tao shackles that Nietion had released had locked up the key meridians in his body, firmly stabilizing them. It seemed that Nietion wanted to use some kind of terrifying power, and he was worried that his martial body would not be able to withstand it. So he used the heavenly Tao shackles to stabilize his meridians in advance, forcing his martial body to the limit. Interesting. High up in the sky, Zuwan's figure appeared. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he said, "I want to see what other tricks you have up your sleeves." Of course, he could tell what Nietion was doing. He wanted to know what other terrifying power Nietion had in his body. If Nietion accidentally released the 9 extreme chaos beast, that would be for the best. Devil's Eye open. At this moment, the corners of Nietion's mouth twitched as he said solemnly, "Divine punishment open." Boom! Boom! As his voice fell, his eyes suddenly changed. They became as dark as the abyss. Suddenly, 2 terrifying eye powers surged out and rushed against his martial body. Like a wild beast, he pushed his god-fiend body to the extreme. Boom! In an instant, his whole body's aura suddenly exploded. The power of a raging wave impacted the void and caused it to rumble. At this moment, the pressure that his martial body was under was also very terrifying. Under the huge pressure, his bones let out a low groan. If he had not used the heavenly Tao shackles to stabilize his body in advance, he would have exploded and died. Good. Very good. Zhu Wan's eyes slightly darkened. What appeared in his eyes was not panic, but a strong desire to fight. He did not expect that Nie Tian would use such a method that was almost self-harming to increase his combat power. He saw a side of Nie Tian that was even more terrifying than Dongwang Zhengrong. Nie Tian's talent, willpower, and ambition were not inferior to Dongwang Zhengrong. What was more terrifying was that Nie Tian had something that Dongwang Zhengrong did not have, and that was ruthlessness. Zhu Wan looked at Nie Tian's eyes. That kind of ruthlessness was rarely seen even in a cruel martial artist who killed people like flies. Without a doubt, Nie Tian was more ruthless than Dongwang Zhengrong. Chapter 4108. Boom! On the arena, Nie Tian soared into the sky like a sharp sword. The impact caused the world to shake, and the surrounding time and space seemed to be forcibly torn apart. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but tremble violently. Nie Tian is clearly seriously injured, but he can still erupt with such sword intent. It's really terrifying. He seems to have used some kind of terrifying bloodline power. Those 9 shackles are used to stabilize his martial body because he can't bear the bloodline pressure. This guy is really desperate. For this battle, he doesn't care about anything. That's right. But even if he wins this battle, what will he use to fight against Zhu Shi next? The crowd said, and the shock in their eyes became even more intense. This battle had already reached this point, and no matter who won or lost, it was impossible to retreat unscathed. Everyone could see that even the final winner between the two of them would only be able to win a Pyrrhic victory. To kill 1,000 enemies, one had to suffer 800 casualties, and that winner still had to fight against Zhu Shi next. How could he fight? Imperceptibly, the biggest beneficiary of this battle had become Zhu Shi. But at this time, Nie Tian and Zhu Wan obviously couldn't care too much. It was better to win the battle in front of them first. Buzz. In the sky above the arena, the sound of a sword was shocking. The sword intent surged like a raging tide, enveloping the surrounding void. The power of the world suddenly tightened, as if it was about to collapse. Come on. Zhu Wan felt the pressure of the sword intent, and his eyes were wild with excitement. With a low roar, the demonic spear in his hand swept through the air. A spear shadow appeared, and the moment it appeared, it was like a giant dragon, stirring up the surrounding space. Boom! In the next moment, the spear and sword collided, and the world shook. The surging waves of air blasted out, and the two felt as if they were in a roaring sea. Nie Tian's figure trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. On the other side, Zhu Wan's figure only swayed a little, but a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In this battle, Zhu Wan was injured for the first time. That guy is injured. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they couldn't help but exclaim. From the beginning of the battle, Zhu Wan had the absolute advantage, while Nie Tian had been suppressed. Imperceptibly, everyone hoped to see the moment when they counterattacked. Now that Nie Tian had injured Zhu Wan with a single sword strike, everyone could not help but become excited. Very good. Zhu Wan's eyes were extremely gloomy, and a dark aura slowly surged around him. He roared like a wild beast and took a step forward. The ghost dragon in his hand shook, and rays of black light appeared, condensing into the image of a black dragon that coiled around the ghost dragon. Nie Tian steadied himself and immediately felt that the aura on the ghost dragon had become even more terrifying. The evil might was even stronger than before. It was as if there really was a ghost dragon hidden within Zhu Wan's demonic spear. Nie Tian, you have not disgraced the name of the star sky, saint, by holding on until now. Zhu Wan's dragon spear swept across the sky, and his entire body was filled with killing intent. But unfortunately, you cannot defeat me. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding space was suddenly enveloped by a deathly ghost aura. Under the influence of this ghost aura, the surrounding space showed a state of solidification, becoming as hard as steel. Nietion's expression flickered as he sensed a powerful pressure coming from the surrounding space. It was as if a giant invisible hand was firmly restraining him. Nietion, it's all over. Die. At that moment, Zhu Wan said in a low voice. His figure moved, and he took a step forward. With the tip of his spear pointed, the image of a ghost dragon appeared. The surging aura seemed to be able to destroy everything, and it pressed down on Nietion. Nietion's eyes suddenly narrowed. In the darkness, the power of his eyes surged, and he once again tried to break through the martial body. Suddenly, his body released a powerful aura, forcibly breaking through the void. Crack, crack, crack. In the next instant, the space around them began to crumble. The sealed space was broken in an instant. Seventh limit, yin-yang reversal. After which, Nietion's sword pierced through the air, directly piercing towards the sky. Sword shadows whistled through the air, shaking the heavens. Bang! The two forces collided, causing the space to tremble as the two silhouettes simultaneously retreated. A pair of astral soul wings appeared behind Nietion's back. Only with a flap of his wings did he manage to stabilize himself. He turned and glanced at his surroundings. If he retreated a few more meters, he would already be outside the arena. On the other side, although Zhu Wan managed to stabilize himself, the bloodstains at the corner of his lips were even more obvious. Evidently, his injuries had worsened. Nietion looked at Zhu Wan from afar, his eyes trembling slightly. At this moment, he had a strong feeling that his body was being torn apart. If it weren't for the 9 shackles of the Tao of the heavens holding him in place, he would have already been ripped to shreds. He used the power of his eyes to break through to the martial body, pushing his fiend god physique to its limits, allowing his strength to rise to the next level. But even so, he still couldn't withstand Zhu Wan's terrifying ghost aura, especially the devil spear in Zhu Wan's hands. It seemed to contain an endless amount of ghost aura. It was extremely bizarre. Nietion, you've already done your best. Let's stop here. Up in the air, Zhu Wan's eyes flickered with a cold light. The ghost spear in his hands emitted a bizarre aura. Is that so? Nietion Lung smiled, after which he directly moved. His long sword pierced through the air, causing numerous gigantic sword shadows to appear outside the arena. The same sword technique can defeat Xiao Wanjie, but it can't defeat me. Zhu Wan's eyes darkened as he coldly laughed. How could he not see that Nietion wanted to use Tranquil transformation to repeat the same trick? Previously, when Nietion fought against Xiao Wanjie, the latter was defeated by Tranquil transformation. Zhu Wan had personally witnessed that battle. How could he allow Nietion to take advantage of him? Roar of the dragon in 8 directions. The next moment, Zhu Wan let out a low roar. His figure soared into the sky and stabbed out with his spear. Suddenly, 8 ghost dragon shadows appeared, sweeping in all directions. Before Nietion could react, 8 of the 9 sword shadows collapsed in an instant, and he was also seriously injured. His figure trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Nietion, this is the last move. I'll let you see my true strength, primordial ghost aura. At this moment, Zhu Wan said in a deep voice. Then, he put away the devil spear and ghost dragon and released an unprecedented ghost aura. Primordial ghost aura? Nietion's expression changed slightly. He felt that the ghost aura on Zhu Wan's body had increased several times in an instant. How is this possible? Chapter 4109. On the arena, Nietion's face couldn't help but sink when he felt the pressure that assaulted his face. Even he, who was at his limit, couldn't bear such a terrifying power. In an instant, he fell into a life and death situation. At the moment of life and death, Nietion suddenly felt something and his face changed. He couldn't help but exclaim, "What's going on?" Suddenly, he felt a strange surge of energy in his body, and actually caused his aura to directly skyrocket. It's the prophecy Saint's seal. In the next moment, he suddenly reacted and looked at the prophecy Saint's seal in his palm in shock. The prophecy Saint's seal was left on his palm by the human emperor, Firmament Emperor. It was something he used to find the child of prophecy. He never thought that the prophecy Saint's seal would actually explode with a strange power. Boom! Before Nye Tian could think about what was going on, the prophecy Saint's seal exploded with a terrifying power that rushed towards his martial body. However, he didn't feel any pressure. Instead, he felt a sense of power exploding. Sacred heaven-defying sword. 3 talents returned to 1. Heaven and earth stability. In an instant, Nye Tian didn't have time to think too much. The sword in his hand pointed towards the sky and stabbed out. Immediately, a terrifying sword intent soared into the sky. The heaven and earth trembled as a terrifying sword image appeared like a primordial beast, vowing to tear the heaven and earth apart. Bang! In the next moment, the dark palm image and the soaring sword image collided in the most direct way. Suddenly, the heaven and earth trembled, dark clouds rolled, astral winds howled, and the surrounding time and space became chaotic. Boom, boom, boom. Chi-chi, chi-bang, bang, bang. On the huge martial stage, a terrifying power rolled and attacked. Time and space rumbled, and the power of heaven and earth actually distorted under the pressure of the huge power. One could even see the formation on the martial stage slowly moving. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. Their expressions trembled and their eyes were filled with shock. They were completely speechless. They never thought that Nye Tian, who originally didn't have the strength to fight back, could explode with such a terrifying power in an instant. Bang! Just as everyone was in shock, a loud explosion rang out in the air. Then, the gigantic palm image directly shattered, turning into rolling black waves that dissipated into the surroundings. No! Almost at the same time, Zhu Wan cried out in pain. His figure suddenly trembled and soared into the sky, drawing a bloody trail in the sky. At that moment, Nye Tian charged out of the rolling, turbid waves, looking down at the heavens like a god of swords. He stood coldly in the air, his silver hair fluttering like a sharp sword, his whole body surging with a fierce aura. High up in the sky, Zhu Wan trembled as he fixed his bloodthirsty eyes on Nye Tian. Instead of ferocity, there was confusion and apprehension in his eyes. Zhu Wan didn't expect that his attack with the primordial ghost energy would be blocked by Nye Tian. In fact, he had even suffered a crushing defeat in the final exchange of blows. Nye Tian was only at the 4th level of heavenly righteousness. There was an entire level difference between them. Under such circumstances, he actually lost. How was this possible? He was the ancestor of all ghosts. Even though he was not as powerful as he was back in the day, he should not have ended up like this. He had fought against countless enemies in his life. Never had anyone defeated him when they were a whole level lower than him. Even Dong Huang Zhengrong, who had once dominated the world, could not do it. But Nye Tian did it. You have lost. Nye Tianling stood in the void and said coldly. His aura was cold, like a demon, but there was no murderous intent on him. His goal was not to kill the ancestor of all ghosts. He only wanted to win the competition. That was all. Yeah. Ugh. Zhu Wan's eyes trembled as if he had just woken up from a dream. Just as he was about to say something, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Nye Tian frowned. He did not expect Zhu Wan to be so heavily injured. The power that erupted from the prophecy sage seal just now was so terrifying that even he felt inexplicably shocked. It's over, Nye Tian said. He did not want to waste too much time. He turned around and prepared to leave. Nye Tian. However, at this moment, Zhu Wan called out to him. He stared at him and said solemnly, "You can't win this battle. You can only lose. You have already lost. Don't you think it's ridiculous to say such words?" Nye Tian frowned and smiled coldly. Nye Tian, you have no idea what this battle means. Zhu Wan, however, said with a serious expression, "If you win, something terrible will happen." Scary. Nye Tian laughed and said coldly, As far as I'm concerned, the scariest thing is that I lost. At this moment, Zhu Wan's expression was very strange, and he was speaking in a language that Nye Tian couldn't understand at all. They. Zhu Wan's eyes trembled. His expression became even more strange. They will be here soon. Nye Tian could feel the panic in Zhu Wan's eyes. He frowned and asked, "Who are they?" "Wu Kuei's reward is what they need." Zhu Wan paused and said in a deep voice, "Are they here for the reward?" Nye Tian frowned and his expression changed. The all-ghost ancestor was so afraid of the they he mentioned. This was a very terrifying force. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and Qing Qi also said that once the reward was revealed, many forces would fight for it. It seemed that this they was one of the forces that wanted to fight for the reward. It was a very powerful force that was not weaker than the heavenly lost sacred pavilion. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Zhu Wan and asked, "You came to participate in the hidden dragon battle for that thing, right?" It was obvious that Zhu Wan was under the orders of the mysterious organization. Otherwise, with his identity, he would not participate in the hidden dragon battle. Yes. Zhu Wan nodded. Nye Tian, trust me, you don't want to see those people appear. You absolutely cannot win this battle. What if I must win? Nye Tian's lips twitched. His eyes were extremely determined. Nye Tian, you don't understand how terrifying those people are. Zhu Wan's eyes trembled. If they appear, the entire all-heaven sacred world will be in danger. I don't know about them, just like how I don't know about you. But I can still defeat you. With a calm expression, Nye Tian looked at Zhu Wan and said, "If they want to come, let them." You pfft. Zhu Wan stared at Nye Tian. He was so excited that he vomited blood again. He didn't have the strength to fight anymore. If Nye Tian didn't admit defeat, he would have already lost this battle. Chapter 41:10. I admit defeat. On the stage, the all-ghost ancestor was silent for a long time before he finally admitted defeat. Nye Tian, you've made the wrong choice. You'll regret it very soon. Thank you for the reminder. Nye Tian smiled and said, "You can leave the stage now." The all-ghost ancestor was unwilling to give up, but he still walked down the stage. The crowd stared at the figure of the all-ghost ancestor for a long time before they realized that Nye Tian had won. That guy actually won. This is unbelievable. Where did he get his strength from at the last moment? So what if he won? His battle with Zhu Yuan has already exhausted his strength. He only has half a day to rest. How is he going to fight Zhu Shi then? That's true. Zhu Shi is terrifying to begin with. Now that his opponent is seriously injured, he's destined to be the martial leader. As they spoke, they looked at Nye Tian with a hint of sympathy in their eyes. It had only taken Nye Tian a short time to go from being a nobody to shocking the crowd. He had truly experienced countless life and death situations to reach this point. Unfortunately, he no longer stood a chance in the following battle. Nye Tian, you can leave the stage now. You have half a day to rest. Prepare for the next battle. A figure in green appeared on the stage. It was the judge who had been hiding. He said to Nye Tian coldly. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he said, "No need. Let's continue." "What did you say?" The judge was stunned at first, then his face sank. He thought he had heard wrong. Nye Tian seemed to mean that he didn't need to rest and could directly proceed to the next battle. Face calm, Nye Tian said with a plain tone. "I said, we can start the next battle now." At this moment, the 9 heavenly Tao shackles were still around his body, and the wounds on his body had not yet healed. His entire body looked like it was riddled with wounds, and his face was as pale as a sheet of paper, without the slightest trace of blood. He gave off the feeling that he was on the verge of death. His words caused an uproar in the crowd. Is this guy crazy? He's already heavily injured, yet he still wants to continue fighting. Isn't that courting death? Although he didn't rest for long, only half a day, this guy's martial body is strong. He should be able to recover quite a bit after resting for half a day. He's in such a hurry to fight Zhu Shi. Could it be that he's prepared to directly admit defeat? It's better to just admit defeat. With his current state, there is indeed no need for him to continue fighting. As everyone spoke, they all felt that Nye Tian wanted to directly admit defeat. However, at this moment, Nietion's face was calm and his eyes were firm. He didn't look like he was going to admit defeat. Nietion, I will give you a chance to take back what you just said. The judge looked at Nietion and frowned as he spoke in a deep voice. I just want to end the battle as soon as possible. Can't I? Nietion's face was gloomy and cold. You don't know what's good for you. The judge was obviously angry. He scolded coldly and said directly, Since you want to die, why should I stop you? After saying that, he looked up at the sky and said in a deep voice, Zhu Shi, your opponent is ready. Enter the arena and fight. As soon as he finished speaking, the sky shook slightly. Then, a figure suddenly descended and landed on the arena. It was Zhu Shi. When the judge saw Zhu Shi appear, he glanced at Nietion cold. Without saying anything, his figure moved and directly disappeared into the void. Nietion, I really didn't expect that the person I will fight in the end would be you. Zhu Shi's figure was like a mountain, standing in the sky like an iceberg. The space around him was covered in a layer of frost, as if it would freeze at any time. Before the hidden dragon battle officially started, he had fought with Nietion and defeated Nietion in one move. At that time, he had already felt that Nietion's strength was far beyond that of ordinary cultivators. But at that time, he had never thought that Nietion would be able to reach the last step of the hidden dragon battle and finally fight with him. Just now, he had seen Nietion's battle, especially the battle between Nietion, Zhu Wan, and Xiu Wanjie, which made him shudder. If he had been the one fighting at that time, he would have had to pay a considerable price to win. Especially Zhu Wan, his strength was strong, and his methods were strange. He was definitely a strong opponent. Zhu Shi originally thought that the person who would fight with him in the end would be Zhu Wan, but he didn't expect that Nietion would be able to turn the situation around at the last moment. And what was even more unexpected was that after Nietion defeated Zhu Wan, he actually wanted to fight with him. After seeing Nietion's true strength, he felt that if Nietion was at his peak, he might have a chance to fight with him. But now, Nietion had no chance at all. In the previous battle, I lost. Nietion's face was calm. He smiled faintly and said, Now, I want to win this battle. Win? Zhu Shi's eyes darkened, and he smiled cold. Nietion, I don't care what you're planning, but in front of me, Zhu Shi, you have no chance of winning. After saying that, his body suddenly shook. Instantly, endless cold qi exploded, like thousands of arrows shooting out at the same time, madly spreading in all directions, instantly enveloping the entire martial stage. Zhu Shi knew that Nietion was not someone an ordinary person could compare to, so even if he was facing the latter in a heavily injured state, he absolutely could not be careless. The previous Xiu Wanjie and Zhu Wan were examples. Who knew how much power Nietion still had hidden in his body? Boundary. Nietion's eyes slightly focused, and he immediately felt a bone-piercing cold. Like tiny but unstoppable blades, it penetrated his skin, seeped into his bones and meridians, and almost froze his entire body. Nietion, this is my realm of frozen end. Zhu Shi's eyes flashed, and he said, I know that you have a mark of the ancestral dragon in your body, so your final trump card should be dragon energy. That's right, you guessed correctly. Nietion smiled faintly, and the corner of his mouth pulled into a strange smile. He said, But you only guessed half of it. Half. Zhu Shi's expression slightly changed, and he immediately became alert. When Nietion fought against Xiu Wanjie and Zhu Wan, he did not use the dragon energy in his body, because he wanted to save it for the end to deal with Zhu Shi. Previously, when he fought with Zhu Shi, he already knew that the latter was of the Grand Shaman Frozen End bloodline. The Grand Shaman Frozen End was one of the 4 great ancestral dragons, and its dragon energy was unimaginably strong. The reason why Zhu Shi was able to stand at the top of the Hidden Sky ranking and had the title of Subduing the Heavens was because of the marks of Frozen End in his body. But Nietion was the legendary dragon shepherd of the dragon race, and the mark of the ancestral dragon in his body was not among the 4 great marks of the ancestral dragon, but was formed by the fusion of 2 kinds of marks of the ancestral dragon. During their last battle, Nietian had sensed that his dragon-herding aura had somewhat suppressed Zhu Shi's frozen end aura. So he saved the dragon shepherd energy for the end, to suppress Zhu Shi. Chapter 4111. Dragon Husbandry Energy and Reverse Dragon Soul. These were the powers that Nietian had kept for himself in the end. They were also the power he wanted to use against Zhu Shi. Back in the martial demon Forbidden Sky, Nietian already knew that there was a mysterious resonance between the dragon husbandry energy and the reverse dragon energy. He had even used the resonance of the two to forcefully suppress Mori Shire's dark blood wings. Just the dragon husbandry energy alone was not enough to fight against Zhu Shi, but if the reverse dragon energy of the reverse dragon soul was added, then it would be enough. Nietian, no matter what tricks you have, you will lose today. Zhu Shi's eyes were as cold as ice. The frozen end energy around his body roiled like a raging wave. Everywhere it passed, the void was instantly frozen. Xiaowan Jie and Zhu Wan both said the same thing, but they have all been defeated by me. Nie Tianling smiled. The dragon vein in his body began to circulate. Roiling dragon energy appeared outside his body. It was vigorous and surging, as if a real dragon was swimming in the sky. Zhu Shi sneered and said, I, Zhu Shi, am the one who subdues the heavens. How can those trash compare to me? Finished speaking, the frozen end energy around his body became even more terrifying. The dragon energy was as sharp as a blade of cold wind, and it made a tearing sound in the void. It sounded very terrifying. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. Zhu Shi's mouth was very arrogant. He dared to call the all-ghost ancestor trash. How courageous. Nietian, you're not a member of the dragon race, but you have a dragon vein in your body. Moreover, the dragon vein has formed the marks of the ancestral dragon. I am very surprised. Zhu Shi stood, but unfortunately, your cultivation is too low, and the marks of the ancestral dragon are not awakened enough. It is impossible for you to fight against me. I will only know if it is possible after I try. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. His figure shot into the sky, and an enormous dragon silhouette appeared around him. The impact caused the world around him to tremble, as if it could not withstand this enormous force, and was about to collapse in the next moment. Courting death. Seeing Nietian rush over, Zhu Shi's expression darkened. With a low roar, the frozen end energy around his body instantly erupted. Like a 10,000-meter-long glacier, it swept over and pressed down on Nietian with a loud bang. Croc, croc, croc. The extremely terrifying frozen end energy swept over, and everywhere it passed, the void was directly frozen. The bone-chilling aura covered the sky and earth, as if it wanted to freeze everything. Nietian's expression changed slightly, but he was not afraid in the slightest. Instead, he directly rushed over. In the next instant, his body paused in midair. He had actually been frozen in an instant. This shocking scene caused everyone's expression to change, and they all cried out in alarm. No one expected that Nietian would be frozen by Zhu Shi. Nietian is still too careless. In his current state, it's impossible for him to resist Zhu Shi's power of ice. Why did he rush forward to die? Rather than fighting in such a suicidal way, it's better to just admit defeat. Zhu Shi lives up to his name as the one who subdues the heavens. He is indeed strong. Everyone's gaze trembled as they discussed. Obviously, they all felt that Nietian had already lost. However, Nietian was fearless in the frozen space. His body remained motionless, as if he was really frozen. However, if one were to look closely, they would discover that his body was enveloped by a faint layer of dragon aura, which created a space for him to move around. He was not imprisoned. He was only pretending to be imprisoned. It's over. Seeing that Nietian was frozen, Zhu Shi's eyes instantly lit up. Then, with a low roar, his figure immediately moved. He angrily slapped out with his palm, and an ice blade surged out from his palm. The surrounding space suddenly stagnated and inexplicably stopped for a moment. In an instant, Niet Tian felt a chill that penetrated his soul, making him feel as if he was placed in an ice house. The bones and meridians in his body were all about to be frozen. What followed was an incomparably real aura of death, a life-threatening, killing blow. It was obvious that Zhu Shi wanted to kill Niet Tian directly, not giving him any chance to do so. "You want to kill me like this? It's too easy." But at this moment, the corner of Niet Tian's mouth suddenly pulled up into a sinister smile, and then the dragon energy in his body suddenly erupted. With an earth-shattering momentum, it broke through the surrounding frozen space. Suddenly, heaven and earth shook, and the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. Bang, bang, bang. In the void, the frozen space rapidly exploded, and in the invisible space, icicles appeared, and a sharp and cold aura filled the entire martial arts arena. How is this possible? Zhu Shi was shocked by the scene in front of him, and his face went blank for a moment before he let out a strange cry. Niet Tian was clearly frozen by him. How could he break through the power of the ice? Even if Niet Tian's scar, the ancestral dragon, was stronger than his, under the situation of being suppressed, it was impossible for it to explode with such power. This unbelievable scene made Zhu Shi unable to understand. What kind of freak was Niet Tian? How could he be so terrifying? And at this moment, the dragon energy outside Niet Tian's body tumbled endlessly, and the dragon's roar shook the sky, as if there really was a divine dragon hiding in his body. However, in his body, there was a constant crackling sound, which was the sound of his meridians and bones colliding and groaning under the tremendous pressure. His martial body was already at its limit, and he was also seriously injured. At this moment, he was suffering the impact of the dragon Mu Qi, and the pressure was unimaginable. Yes, thanks to the 9 heavenly shackles, Niet Tian's martial body would have exploded and died. But then a strange look surged in his eyes, and then the reverse dragon soul appeared in his hand. At this moment, he was actually going to activate the reverse dragon Qi in the reverse dragon soul, and cause the dragon Mu to resonate with it. He was already on the verge of collapse, and now was his only chance. Boom! In the next moment, without the slightest hesitation, Niet Tian activated the reverse dragon soul with a thought. Immediately, an enormous amount of reverse dragon Qi surged out and merged with the surrounding wood dragon Qi. A heaven-shaking dragon roar resounded through the entire vast cloud square. This! The crowd trembled in shock and exclaimed in unison. They were completely dumbfounded, not knowing what was going on. At this moment, a terrifying lightning dragon appeared outside Niet Tian's body. It soared into the sky angrily. At this moment, Niet Tian no longer looked like a human, but a real dragon, a dragon with the power to destroy the world. Rumble. In the void, the dragon charged in all directions, and wherever it passed, the frozen space collapsed. The icy blade had long been submerged in the dragon's powerful impact. Chapter 41:12. The shocking scene caused everyone's eyes to freeze. Their expressions stiffened, and they were petrified on the spot. Niet Tian was originally in a situation of certain death, but in an instant, he broke through the ice and erupted with an incomparably huge power. It was simply too terrifying. High up in the sky, the might of the giant dragon engulfed the world. The enormous figure surged and charged forward, and after spinning a few times in the air for hundreds of thousands of meters, it slowly disappeared. Everyone stared at the place where the giant dragon had disappeared, unable to react for a long time. "Where's Zhu Shi?" After a long time, someone finally reacted and couldn't help but cry out. "That's right, where's Zhu Shi?" Even more people came to a sudden realization. They looked at the empty sky and were momentarily stunned. Zhu Shi was nowhere to be seen in the place where the giant dragon had charged past. Could it be that he had been directly killed? The head of the Hidden Heaven sect, Fu Tian, was actually killed by Niet Tian in a single move. Was this possible? Moreover, it was Niet Tian who was in a heavily injured state. At this time, everyone's gazes shifted to Niet Tian's body, only to see a blood-colored figure trembling as he stood in the air above the martial stage. He was like a fallen leaf in the wind, about to be torn apart by the gale in the next moment. However, Niet Tion stood there the entire time and did not fall. He won. The crowd looked at the unyielding figure with trembling eyes. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. This final battle was not as exciting as they had imagined, but it was far more shocking and unexpected than they had imagined. Zhu Shi, admit defeat. Right at this moment, Niet Tion suddenly lowered his head and looked towards the martial stage. His gaze landed on a bloodied figure standing there. His facial features and bones were completely distorted, and it was difficult to tell that it was a human. But this blood-soaked figure was Zhu Shi. Zhu Shi. Everyone turned their gazes and looked at the badly mutilated figure, all of them exclaiming in shock. No one noticed when Zhu Shi had landed on the martial stage. It was too strange. However, Niet Tion had seen it clearly. The moment Zhu Shi had suffered the impact of the dragon, he did not retreat. Instead, he had directly rushed down. Although he had suffered a huge impact, he had managed to preserve his life. At that moment, if Zhu Shi had retreated, there would only be one outcome: death. At the moment of life and death, Zhu Shi made the right choice. Even so, he was still severely injured. Not only was his martial physique completely shattered, even his martial veins suffered a huge blow. It was very likely that his martial Dao foundation and talent would be damaged. Zhu Shi jerked his head up and stared at Niet Tion with bloodshot eyes as he asked in a deep voice, "Niet Tion, what kind of power are you using?" He had been too careless in this battle. It wasn't until the moment Niet Tion made his move that he suddenly realized that Niet Tion wasn't frozen at all. He was just pretending to be frozen to lure him into making a move. If he hadn't acted rashly at that time, he wouldn't have ended up like this. What he didn't expect was that Niet Tion, who was heavily injured, could unleash such a terrifying power. He had already experienced Niet Tion's dragon hurting Qi. It was extremely terrifying. However, Niet Tion had clearly unleashed another kind of power. This power was somewhat similar to the dragon Qi, but it had a strong suppression effect on the dragon Qi. When this power merged with the dragon hurting Qi, it resonated with it. It was the resonance between the two powers that caught him off guard and caused him to suffer a crushing defeat. Dragon defying Qi. Niet Tion's eyes narrowed slightly as he spoke in a deep voice. He wanted Zhu Shi to understand why he had lost. Dragon defying Qi. Zhu Shi's lips twitched and his voice trembled. The bloodshot color in his eyes gradually faded and was replaced by deep shock and fear. Niet Tion clearly possessed a more powerful dragon Qi than him. How could he also possess a power that could suppress dragon Qi to such an extent? Who exactly is Niet Tion? Is he a person possessed by an old monster? Zhu Shi's heart trembled as the panic in his eyes intensified. The reason why he had participated in the Hidden Dragon contest was because he had received a joint invitation from the 5 academies. The people from the 5 academies had told him that his mission was very simple. All he had to do was obtain the position of Marshal Kuei, obtain the Marshal Kuei reward, and then return the reward to the 5 academies. Of course, the 5 academies would give him great compensation. They would definitely not let him suffer a loss. He did not understand why the 5 academies wanted to do this, but he felt that it would not do him any harm, so he had agreed. To him, defeating the Marshal Kuei of the 5 academies was a piece of cake. Furthermore, the 5 academies had given him a great advantage, allowing him to directly become the Marshal Kuei. He stood in the position of the Marshal Kuei. In the final battle, no matter who it was, they would be heavily injured. However, he had never dreamed that a cultivator that he had looked down on, a cultivator that could not even get close to him, could actually defeat him in a single move despite being heavily injured. This was something that he could not accept at all. The 5 academies had clearly invited Zhu Shi to protect that item. That item was so important that it was related to the lifeline of the All Saints world. The 5 academies obviously would not hand it over. The reason why they had set that item as the Marshal Kuei reward was to lure out an unknown enemy. However, Nietion's appearance had completely disrupted the five academies' plans. Nietion looked at Zhu Shi and frowned slightly. He had vaguely guessed something. Zhu Wan was sent by the hidden organization to fight for that item. In that case, it was extremely likely that Zhu Shi was from the five academies in order to protect that item. At this moment, Nietion suddenly felt several powerful auras appear in the sky. They were like ferocious tigers in the dark, ready to make a move. He frowned. Then, he moved and directly dove toward Zhu Shi. I admit defeat. Zhu Shi suddenly felt the incoming killing intent in an instant. He was so frightened that his expression changed, and he immediately shouted. Nietion's figure paused in the air before he landed steadily on the arena, standing in front of Zhu Shi. You? Zhu Shi was stunned. He immediately realized that Nietion was only trying to make him admit defeat. I want to see who the person behind you is. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched. Then he looked into the sky. At this moment, in the originally peaceful void, a series of rumbling sounds rang out. Then, five figures slowly walked out, standing in the sky like five mountains. The auras of the five people were like mountains and seas. Just by standing there, it was as if the entire world had become small. They actually had an aura that could make the heavens and earth bow down to them. What powerful people! Nietion's eyes darkened as he looked at the five figures. He exclaimed in his heart. Chapter 41:13. The five silhouettes stood majestically like a mountain, releasing an invisible pressure that immediately made everyone in Haoyan Square feel a suffocating pressure. Everyone looked at the five figures in shock. They could not help but discuss softly. Who are they? Their auras are so powerful. It's too terrifying. When I see them, I feel like I'm looking at a mountain. I actually have the urge to prostrate and worship them. With such an aura, they must be the peak figures of the all-heaven sacred world. The five people's auras were as vast as the ocean and as enormous as the mountains. The pressure was irresistible. In the entire all-heaven sacred world, there were definitely less than 100 people with such an aura. Nietion looked at the five figures, and his face suddenly darkened. He was extremely shocked. Among all the people he had seen, only the Lord of all ghosts could be mentioned in the same breath as the five people. Even the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and the Heavenly Fiend Lonely Star Lord seemed to be slightly weaker than the five people. He guessed that the people behind Zhu Shi were very likely from the five academies. Among the five people, the person in the middle was not unfamiliar to Nietion. It was the Heavenly Law Palace Lord Zhuge Qiyun, who he had specially asked to meet not long ago. Could the remaining four be the deans of the other four academies? The deans of the five academies. Below the arena, Qing Chi was shocked when he saw the five figures. He exclaimed in his heart. Nietion had guessed correctly. Apart from Zhuge Qiyun, the other four were the supreme figures of the four academies, the four deans. The five people were the deans of the five academies. He did not expect them to appear at the same time. The deans of the five academies were all peak figures of the all-heaven sacred world. Normally, it was extremely difficult to meet any one of them, let alone all five of them appearing at the same time. Now that all five deans had appeared at the same time, it was enough to show how much importance the five academies placed on the Hidden Dragon tournament. Zhuge Qiyun stood in the middle of the five. His white clothes fluttered in the wind, and he had the bearing of an otherworldly expert. On his left and right were the deans of the Dragon Martial Academy, Bing Feiqiu, and the deans of the Bloodwing Academy, Xinguang Muxue. Standing on the left and right were by Chang Sheng, the principal of Shi Feng Academy, and Qin Feng, the principal of Wanwu Academy. The five people's auras were like mountains, and the world seemed small in front of them. At the moment when everyone was bewildered, Zhuge Qiyun took a step forward and revealed his identity. I am the Heavenly Law Palace's master, Zhuge Qiyun, Heavenly Law Palace Master. Everyone cried out in alarm. They immediately came to a realization. No wonder his aura was so frightening. It turned out that he was the Heavenly Law Palace's Palace Master. Zhuge Qiyun had appeared before, but not many people had seen him before. Now that he had officially appeared, it naturally caused a commotion. Martial Dragon Dean Bing Feiqiu, Bloodwings Dean Xingguang Muxue, Headmaster by Changsheng of the 10 Directions, Dean Qin Fong. Following that, the 4 deans spoke one after another. Their vigorous voices were like thunder, echoing in the ears of the crowd. The crowd looked at the 5 of them, and they were even more shocked. Who would have thought that the 5 great deans would actually appear at the same time? After that, everyone couldn't help but wonder why the 5 great deans would appear at the hidden dragon battle at the same time. Could it be that they are here for Nie Tian? Previously, some people had seen Zhuge Qiyun appear in order to rope in Nie Tian. Now, they couldn't help but feel doubtful. If the 5 great deans appeared for the same cultivator, it was easy to imagine how frightening that cultivator would be. In fact, the crowd's guess wasn't wrong. The 5 great deans had indeed come for Nie Tian. However, it wasn't to rope him in. Rather, it was because Nie Tian's sudden appearance had disrupted their original plan. Nie Tian, we meet again. At that moment, Zhuge Qiyun spoke. He looked at Nie Tian from afar and said with a smile, I really didn't expect that you would be the one to become the Martial Kuei in the end. Congratulations. Thank you, Lord Palace Master. Nie Tian bowed slightly in a respectful manner. However, he was well aware that although Zhuge Qiyun seemed to be congratulating him, that wasn't the case in his eyes. The other 4 deans all looked solemn and didn't speak. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Zhuge Qiyun, waiting to see what he had to say. Nie Tian, do you know that the 5 great schools have prepared a special reward for the Martial Kuei this time? Zhuge Qiyun looked calm and didn't beat around the bush. He asked directly. I don't know. Nie Tian shook his head and pretended that he didn't know. Zhuge Qiyun's gaze froze. He then laughed and said, because this reward isn't normal, the 5 great schools only informed some of the bigger forces and told them not to let the cultivators participating in the Hidden Dragon contest know about it. Therefore, it's not strange that you didn't know about it. Nie Tian smiled. Then, his gaze flickered and he said, May I ask, Lord Palace Master, what is this reward? Qin Chi looked at Nie Tian and his expression changed. His heart skipped a beat. He never thought that Nie Tian would directly ask Zhuge Qiyun about it. Zhuge Qiyun laughed. He did not answer directly. Instead, he said, Nie Tian, it's because that item is extraordinary. It's rumored that it's connected to the lifeline of the All Saints world. Connected to the lifeline of the All Saints world. Everyone's eyes flickered when they heard Zhuge Qiyun's words. Their expressions changed immediately as they were extremely shocked. The Martial Kuei of the 5 academies was indeed very important to the 5 great schools, but it was not important enough for the 5 deans to appear personally. After all, the 5 academies did not recruit only once, and there was more than one Martial Kuei. First, unexpected people appeared one after another in the 5 academies' recruitment this time. There were also many Dark Horse cultivators, followed by the 5 great deans, and now, something related to the lifeline of the all-heaven sacred world had even appeared. It was far too unusual. At this moment, even the less intelligent people could tell that the 5 academies' recruitment this time was very unusual. However, at this moment, they were more concerned about what exactly was related to the lifeline of the All Saints world. Since this item is so important, isn't it a little inappropriate for the 5 academies to use it as a reward for the Martial Kuei? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Zhuge Qiyun from afar. The corner of Zhuge Qiyun's mouth twitched. He forced a smile and said, You might not know this, but this item originally did not belong to the 5 academies. It's just that a long time ago, the 5 academies coincidentally became its protectors by chance. However, some strange changes have happened to this item recently. As a result, the 5 academies have decided to search for its true owner. Chapter 41:14. Nie Tian's eyes were fixed on Zhuge Qiyun from afar, and there was a hint of passion in his eyes. He had heard from Mori Shire that the thing that Wu Kuei rewarded was related to the 9 extreme chaos beast in his body. At this time, even he could not help but feel that perhaps he was the real owner of that thing. That's not it. Zhuge Qiyun's expression changed slightly but he smiled and said, "The reason why the 5 academies made this decision is that we feel that the 5 academies are no longer suitable to continue to guard that thing. We gave that thing to Wu Kuei of the 5 academies just to let Wu Kuei become that thing. The new guardian." Huh? Nietian could not help but be surprised when he heard Zhuge Qiyun's words. He could not tell how much of Zhuge Qiyun's words were true and how much was false. Then, Nietian fixed his eyes and asked directly, "If the 5 academies are guarding that thing, how can a young Wu Kuei guard it? Everything has its own destiny." Zhuge Qiyun laughed and said, "Even if the 5 academies are no longer the guardian of that thing, they will never completely let go of it. You are now the new guardian of that thing. If you ask, the 5 academies will take care of it for you." Nietian's expression changed slightly, and then he fell silent. He heard two meanings from Zhuge Qiyun's words. One was that the 5 academies had to give up that thing for some reason. The other was that the 5 academies did not really want to give it up, but wanted to secretly control that thing. If there was no accident, the current Wu Kuei should be Zhu Shi. After Zhu Shi became the new guardian of that thing, the 5 academies would take care of it for him. But unexpectedly, the current Wu Kuei was not Zhu Shi, but Nietian. Therefore, Zhuge Qiyun was persuading Nietian to let the 5 academies take care of that thing for him. Everyone was confused by Zhuge Qiyun's words. All of them had astonished expressions on their faces. They had no idea what Zhuge Qiyun meant by those words. However, the expressions of the upper echelons of some of the major forces became fiery as they stared at Nietian excitedly. Only a few people knew about the thing that the 5 academies guarded. Before the 5 academies enrollment began, the 5 academies had already informed the higher-ups of some major forces that they would give up that item. Therefore, both Qingqi and Scarlet Life Loyalheart knew about this matter and were very clear about the seriousness of the matter. At this moment, Qingqi was also staring at Nietian with an incomparably fiery expression, as if he was expecting something. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the person who would ultimately stand on the position of Marshal Kuei would be Nietian. He didn't want Nietian to have anything to do with that thing. So he hoped that Nietian would agree to Zhuge Qiyun's request and let the 5 academies continue to guard that thing. But at this moment, Nietian was silent, obviously thinking about something. Zhuge Qiyun and the 4 deans looked at Nietian with burning eyes, but none of them dared to speak. They were afraid that if they appeared too eager, it would make Nietian suspicious. "Master!" After a long time, Nietian finally spoke. He first smiled faintly, then said, "Can I take a look at that thing?" "This?" Zhuge Qiyun was stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect that Nietian would make such a request. But the next moment, he calmed down and said with a smile, "Nietian, I've already told you that that thing is very important and can't be easily revealed, so if that's the case, then I'll personally guard it." Before Zhuge Qiyun finished speaking, Nietian directly interrupted him and said with a smile, "Since I'm already the guardian of that thing, how can I let others do it?" "You." Zhuge Qiyun was stunned by Nietian's sudden change. His old face froze, and he didn't know what to say. "Brat, what are you talking about?" Almost at the same time, Qin Fong, who was at the side, became anxious. He took a step forward and roared, "I want to personally guard that thing. Can't I do that?" Nietian looked at Qin Fong and replied coldly with a dark expression. Qin Fong was instantly enraged. His aura surged and the pressure in the air instantly increased. "Brother Qin, calm down." At this moment, Bloodwing Dean Xinguang Muxue stood up and signaled Qin Fong not to be impulsive. All the sects in the all-heaven sacred world were watching. If Qin Fong attacked Nietian impulsively, the 5 academies would lose face. Although there was a great competition between the 5 academies, at least at this moment, the 5 academies were a whole. They must attack and defend together. Qin Fong frowned and raised his head to look at Zhuge Qiyun. The latter waved his hand slightly, and he calmed down. "Nietian, this thing is very important. There are many people who covet it. The 5 academies have always been cautious when guarding it." Zhuge Qiyun calmed down a lot. He looked at Nietian and said, "Forgive I for being blunt. With your current strength, you don't have the power to guard it all. If you're willing the 5 academies are willing to make an agreement with you. When your strength grows to the point where you can guard it, the 5 academies will return it to you. What do you think? Tian frowned, then smiled and said, "You're too courteous. Since the 5 academies have decided to give this thing to me, and I'm the one who was chosen after your decision, I naturally can't shirk my responsibility. I'm still willing to guard it myself. If I can't guard it, it won't be too late to ask the 5 academies for help." This. Zhuge Qiyun's expression froze, and he didn't know what to say. He didn't expect that Tian was so difficult to deal with. If it were other warriors, they would have already given in to the 5 deans. Could it be that Tian already knew what that thing was? Perhaps there was someone behind Tian, and it was the person behind him who wanted that thing? Zhuge Qiyun guessed in his heart, and his old face looked anxious. Qing Qi looked at Tian, and his expression was even worse than Zhuge Qiyun's. He suddenly remembered that Tian once asked the Scarlet Life Dan Hart if Tian got that thing. From the look of it, Tian had long since made up his mind to get that item. But Tian didn't know what that thing was, and it was impossible for him to know how much danger he would face once that thing fell into his hands. That thing was more than a hot potato. It was simply a star of misfortune. At this time, Tian looked at Zhuge Qiyun and said with a smile, "Lord Sectmaster, if it's convenient, I'd like to accept my responsibility right now. Is that okay?" Zhuge Qiyun's eyes trembled, and his face was extremely ugly. His lips trembled as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. "Boy, the 5 academies will guard that thing for you. Don't think too much about it." Qin Fong, the dean of the 10,000 martial arts school, took a step forward and said coldly. His aura shook violently like a vast ocean. Compared to Zhuge Qiyun, he was more overbearing and unreasonable. Tian frowned. He didn't expect this Wan Wu Dean to be such an arrogant person. Chapter 41:15. Rumble. In the sky above vast cloud, sacred city, dark clouds rolled and connected into one. It was as if endless darkness was pressing down. Instantly, the heaven and earth fell into darkness, as if it was shrouded by the eternal night. At this moment, everyone felt a terrifying pressure that made it hard for them to breathe. Tian looked at the sky and could not help but frown. He could not see what was in the dark clouds. This feeling of the unknown made him panic for no reason, especially the surging dark clouds. It was as if there were countless dark beasts lurking within, making people fearful. At that moment, the dark clouds actually expanded rapidly and spread in all directions. Very soon, it covered the entire vast cloud sacred city and formed a dark cloud pressing down on the city. At that moment, everyone could not help but become flustered. What kind of power is this? Why is it so terrifying? I can't breathe anymore. Are we going to die? Who is that voice in the darkness? Could it be that he is here for the 5 academies? Some people were flustered, some were confused, but most people felt an inexplicable fear. This kind of suffocating pressure from the dark clouds pressing down on the city was simply too terrifying. Even for martial artists with a strong mind, it was hard to endure. "Who are you? Please show yourself." At that moment, Zhuge Qiyun spoke. His eyes were dark, and his aura was like that of a lion. "The 5 academies are going back on their words and losing their demeanor. I just can't take it anymore." A thunderous voice came from the dark clouds and resounded in everyone's ears, making everyone feel like their eardrums were about to explode. Zhuge Qiyun frowned a few times and said, "If that's the case, please show yourself." "Humph." That voice sneered and said, "Zhuge Qiyun, you are also a master of your generation, but you are deceiving a child in front of everyone. Don't you feel ashamed?" Zhuge Qiyun's old face instantly changed. It was extremely ugly, and his chest rose and fell slightly. Clearly, he was suppressing his anger, but he did not explode. Instead, he said, "Sir, you directly called me by my name. Could it be that you and I know each other? We met once, but at that time, you were still a naked baby." The voice laughed and said, "Speaking of which, I have some friendship with your ancestor. You can barely be considered a junior of mine." This. The crowd couldn't help but tremble when they heard what the newcomer said. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. As the Heavenly Law Prefecture Master, Zhuge Qiyun was already a peak existence in the all-heaven sacred world. This person actually said that he knew Zhuge Qiyun's grandmaster, and even said that Zhuge Qiyun could barely be considered as his junior. This was too exaggerated. Zhuge Qiyun was already a bag of old bones. Even though he had the cultivation of the Sky Martial Saint Ancestor Peak, he was a dying man. If this person was of the same generation as Zhuge Qiyun's grandmaster, then which era was he from? How old was he? How terrifying was his cultivation? Thinking about that, the crowd's expressions changed, and the panic in their eyes became even more intense. Zhuge Qiyun's frown deepened, and his eyes slightly trembled. After a long time, he said in a deep voice, "Junior's martial ancestor has already fallen. Since Senior is martial ancestor's friend, and I have met him before, there is no harm in showing yourself." As he spoke, his eyes shone with a strange light. It was obvious that he wanted to see something from the dark clouds. This was the third time he had asked the person in the dark clouds to show himself. His patience was about to run out. "Zhuge Qiyun, don't waste your time." The voice laughed and said, "With your strength, you are not qualified to make me show myself." Zhuge Qiyun's eyes narrowed, and his aura trembled slightly. It was obvious that he couldn't take it anymore. With his current status and identity, how could he not be angry when someone said that he was not qualified? Not to mention whether this person's identity was real or fake. Even if he was really Zhuge Qiyun's friend, he shouldn't have said such big words today. After all, there was a limit to a martial artist's age. Even a Sky martial arts divine ancestor would reach the end of his life after a few million years. Moreover, as a martial artist grew older, their strength could not be maintained at their peak. Therefore, some ancestor-level martial artists might not be as strong as young martial artists of the same level. Of course, some old monsters would use some special methods to extend their lifespans in order to live. However, these methods had great side effects, and it was difficult to maintain their strength. For example, the ancestor of the Mu family that Nie Tian had met in the virtual Luo realm had used a special method to fuse with a dragon mulberry tree. Although he had obtained a lifespan that exceeded the limit, it was not good. It could even be said that he was better off dead. Therefore, if the person in the dark clouds was from the same era as Zhuge Qiyun, he might not be as strong as Zhuge Qiyun. At least under normal circumstances, that person's strength should be weaker than Zhuge Qiyun's. However, since that person had a lifespan that exceeded the limit, it meant that his methods were strange. Perhaps he was different from ordinary people. "Cowardly coward, get out here." At that moment, a deep roar was heard. Then a figure shot into the sky. Immediately, the surrounding space shook as if it was going to collapse. "Brother Qin." The sudden scene made Zhuge Qiyun's expression change, and he cried out in surprise. The person who had attacked was the hot-tempered Din Qin Fong. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at the figure that shot into the sky. They were extremely shocked. Qin Fong's aura was vast, and terrifying power surged around his body. It condensed into a spear shadow, making him look like a dragon that shot into the sky. He shot into the dark clouds in the sky. "This guy is so strong." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He was extremely shocked. As the Dean of 10,000 martial arts, Qin Fong's cultivation had reached the peak a long time ago. He was known as the spear god in the saints' world. In the sky, wherever Qin Fong passed by, the surrounding space would be forcefully torn apart. Terrifying spatial storms surged to the sides like tsunamis, and the entire world roared endlessly. It was extremely terrifying. The heaven-dominating spear technique isn't bad, but it's nowhere near as good as your ancestors. A deep voice rang out from the dark clouds in the sky. Then, the space rumbled, and endless dark clouds surged out. They actually condensed into a terrifying black claw in the sky, grabbing towards Qin Fong. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the black claw landed, directly breaking through the spear shadow around Qin Fong's body. Afterwards, it pulled him into the dark clouds. This The shocking scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble violently. They all cried out in shock as they became stunned. Chapter 41:16. Brother, Brother Qin. Zhuge Qiyun looked at the naked man. His eyes trembled at first, but he immediately reacted and cried out in shock. Dean Wanwu. Everyone exclaimed at this moment. Their eyes widened to the point that their eyeballs were about to pop out. The mighty dean of the 10,000 martial arts world, someone who stood at the apex of the saints' world, had actually been stripped naked and thrown down. This was just too eye-catching. At that moment, Bai Changsheng, the headmaster of Shifeng, waved his hand, and a wave of energy whistled out, directly enveloping Qin Feng, allowing him to land steadily. Qin Feng steadied himself. His body was blocked by the external force, but his face was extremely pale. His eyes were dull, as if he had suffered a great shock. Brother Qin, are you all right? Bai Changsheng frowned as he took a step forward and called out. Qin Feng was still in a daze, as if he had lost his mind. Zhuge Qiyun, Bing Feiqiu, and Xinguang Muxua looked at each other in shock, unable to speak for a moment. Don't worry, he's fine. Then, from the black cloud in the sky, a hearty laughter rang out. I have met his ancestor Qin Batian a few times. Why would I kill him? However, compared to Qin Batian, his tyrannical heaven spear art was simply too lacking. This ancestor merely dragged him over. Give him some pointers. A few words of advice? Zhuge Qiyun and the others were stunned, unable to react for a long time. Just a few words of advice were enough to scare the esteemed Dean Wanwu to such an extent. Junior thanks Senior for not killing me. After a long time, Qin Feng calmed down a little and bowed slowly, looking at the horizon. When everyone saw this scene, they were stunned once again. They looked at the black clouds in the sky with incomparable horror. What kind of status did Qin Feng have? He actually knelt down to that person. Wasn't that too inconceivable? It seemed that that person was right. He was a figure of the same generation as Zhuge Qiyun's grandmaster and Qin Feng's ancestor. Bastard. But at this moment, a low and furious roar came from the black clouds. What kind of person was your ancestor Qin Batian? With a divine spear, even the heavens and earth would not kneel before him. This ancestral master only gave you a few pointers, yet you want to kneel? What kind of reasoning is this? If your ancestor Qin Batian was still alive, he would kill him himself. You unfilial descendant. Qin Feng was shocked, his eyes trembling, not knowing what to say. Zhuge Qiyun and the rest were also stunned. This old monster's temper was quite strange. When others knelt to him, he would scold them. Umph. After that, the voice laughed coldly. If I knew you were a spineless coward, I would have taken you in just now. Qin Feng's eyes trembled and immediately stood up. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He bowed slightly and said, Junior will remember Senior's teachings. Nie Tian saw everything clearly from below. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. The old monster in the black clouds seemed to have some personality. Senior, I wonder why you've come to Vast Cloud's sacred city? After a while, Zhuge Qiyun spoke again. This time, his tone was obviously more respectful. Moreover, he didn't ask for the other party to show himself, but directly asked for the other party's purpose. Zhuge Qiyun, didn't this ancestral master say it just now? Your 5 academies don't follow the rules, and you go back on your words with a child. This ancestral master can't stand it. Can I? The voice in the black clouds said in a deep voice. This. Zhuge Qiyun's face turned ugly. He didn't know what to say. Don't do this and that. As the Heavenly Law Palace Master, the head of the 5 deans, you should have some sense of propriety when you speak and do things. Since that child obtained the Marshal Kuei title, you should give it to him. Don't you understand such a simple principle? The voice in the black clouds sounded a little impatient. Senior, Zhuge Qiyun looked awkward. He didn't know whether to refute or not. Zhuge Qiyun, this ancestral master knows what you are guarding. The voice in the black clouds said in a deep voice, to tell you the truth, this thing was discovered by this ancestral master back then. However, this ancestral master isn't interested in it. So, I handed it to the people of your 5 academies. Guarding. Now that the mission of guarding the 5 academies has ended, handed over to the new guardian. Senior, could it be that you are that person? Zhuge Qiyun's face changed, and he couldn't help but exclaim. He knew that before the 5 academies guarded this thing, there was another owner. According to his ancestral master, that person was an exceptional powerhouse. However, he had a strange temper, so he handed this thing over to the 5 academies. Zhuge Qiyun never expected that the strange person his ancestral master spoke of was actually still alive and had even appeared. What do you mean by that person? This ancestral master is just an ordinary martial artist. I just saw injustice on the road, the voice in the black cloud said loudly with some pride. Everyone's face darkened. It was rare to see such a high-profile person who saw injustice on the road. Senior, if we hand that thing over to Nyetian now, I'm afraid he won't be able to protect it. Zhuge Qiyun frowned and said with a troubled expression, Senior, you might not know this, but not long ago, that thing suddenly changed. It seemed to have sensed something. Then someone found us and forced us to hand it over. Out of desperation, we decided to take the risk and take it out during the Hidden Dragon contest to force out the enemy behind it. Nyetian's appearance was out of our expectations and messed up our original plan. In fact, I'm worried that the little kid was sent by the enemy, right? Before Zhuge Qiyun could finish, the voice in the black clouds laughed and said, Zhuge Qiyun, do you really think this ancestral master is here to see injustice? Zhuge Qiyun's face froze in shock. That person laughed and said, Zhuge Qiyun, do you think you can deal with those people with just these arrangements? Senior, already know? Zhuge Qiyun's eyes trembled and he was shocked. How can a few killing formations and boundaries hide from this ancestral master's eyes? That person laughed again. Then, the dark clouds in the sky rumbled, and runes appeared in the void. They were formations and boundaries. Zhuge Qiyun was stunned, and his entire body stiffened. How could he not see that person was forcefully changing the formations and boundaries that they had set up in advance? This time's Hidden Dragon contest was to lure out the enemy behind it. Therefore, the 5 academies had prepared in advance and set up layers of killing formations and boundaries in the entire vast cloud sacred city. But now, those killing formations and boundaries were changed by that person casually. Chapter 41:17. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As the voice in the black cloud faded, the surrounding space rumbled incessantly. The array formation was forcefully altered. The runes were like flying leaves in the wind, spinning rapidly as if they were looking for a home to return to. At that moment, black figures began to appear. First, there was 1, then 2, then 4, then 8. Very soon, they filled the entire sky. Zhuge Qiyun was stunned by the changes before him. His face twitched and his mouth opened slightly, but he was unable to say anything. He had never thought that the formation and barrier that the 5 academies had meticulously prepared would actually become a place for the enemy to hide. The black figures all had strange auras. Although they were not very powerful, they gave off an almost suffocating pressure. Even someone as powerful as Zhuge Qiyun felt a strong sense of threat. The formation and barrier were originally a trap that the 5 academies had worked together to lure out the enemy and immediately activate the killing formation and barrier to kill them all in one fell swoop. However, at that moment, the power that was supposed to be used to trap and kill the enemy had actually been used by the enemy to hide within. What was even more shocking was that Zhuge Qiyun and the others had not sensed anything at all. If that thing had truly appeared, the enemy hiding within the formation would definitely not be able to hold back and would directly attack. At that time, Zhuge Qiyun and the others would probably be killed before they could even retaliate. Zhuge Qiyun could not help but feel chills run down his spine when he thought of that. He felt lingering fear in his heart. Fortunately, the person in the black cloud had arrived. Otherwise, the 5 academies would probably have been completely destroyed today. Everyone was stunned when they saw the scene in the sky. Shock was written all over their faces. Who are those people? Is something big going to happen today? Something's not right. What is that thing they're talking about? How to draw out so many terrifying people all of a sudden? Those people seemed to be much more terrifying than the 5 deans. Will the all-heaven saints' world be destroyed? The crowd discussed softly. The fear and questions in their hearts made them unable to remain calm. Many people began to retreat, wanting to leave. At this moment, the rumbling in the sky grew even more terrifying. After that, a strange scene occurred. The black shadows actually slowly gathered together and condensed into a terrifying face in the sky. The ghostly face was extremely huge. It was as if its pitch-black eye sockets were as big as the entire vast cloud square. It was extremely terrifying. Brother Lee, long time no see. Your defying God eightfold symbols is even better than before. A low voice sounded from within the black clouds. In front of the enormous ghost face, it was calm and unruffled. The two dark eye sockets of the terrifying ghost face seemed to tremble. Then, the cave-like mouth began to move up and down as it said, "Brother Chio, there are very few people left in our era. I really don't want to be your enemy." "Me too," the voice in the black cloud replied. Under the calmness, there was a hint of determination. "Looks like I'll have to experience Brother Chio's sword today." The horrifying ghost face was silent for a long time before it finally opened its mouth. Immediately, the surrounding darkness aura became even more intense. "My sword has not been drawn for millions of years. I have no choice but to draw my sword today." The voice in the black cloud rang out. Afterwards, a white-robed figure stepped out of the black cloud. He floated about like an otherworldly immortal. The moment he appeared, the dark cloud behind him suddenly brightened. It became brighter and brighter, before turning into thousands of streaks of white light in the end. The surrounding darkness aura weakened significantly. "This aura is..." Everyone stared at the white-robed figure in the sky as their eyes trembled. They were so shocked that they could not even speak. The thousands of streaks of white light in the air clearly possessed the presence of sword intent. Were those streaks of white light the white-robed cultivator's sword intent? It was not difficult for sword intent to condense into white light, but it was far too terrifying for him to condense such tremendous white light at once. There was no lack of swordsmen present, and many of them were first-rate swordsmen. They could even be described as peak swordsmen in the All Saints world. However, they were unable to understand the white-robed cultivator's sword intent. The vastness, sharpness, presence, intent, and rhythm were all beyond their reach. They could not imagine that there would be such a terrifying swordsman in the All Saints world. He had completely surpassed the current peak of the sword world. This person's sword intent makes me feel as vast as the world itself. He might be human, but when I look at him, I feel like he's not a human at all. He's a sword, an extremely sharp sword that seems to have the power to destroy the world. And yet Tian thought as he stared at the white-robed figure. He was incredibly shocked. Before he met this person, his understanding of the way of the sword was only at the peak of Saint D fire. However, once he saw the person, he felt as if his horizons had been completely opened. An impact that came from the level of his spirit made him feel as if a whole new world had appeared before his eyes. At that moment, he felt that his understanding of the sword intent had reached a new breakthrough. He believed that if he could enter the secret realm of heaven and earth one more time, his improvement in the way of the sword would definitely be even more terrifying than the last time. His sword intent is as fierce as fire and as bright as the sun. It intimidates people, but at the same time, it makes people feel warm and safe. "It's just too strange," someone said with trembling eyes as he stared at the white-robed figure. He seemed to have thought of something. Such a terrifying sword intent, and it's a fusion of light and fire. I can only think of one person who can do this. At that moment, a white-haired old man seemed to have discovered something. His eyes trembled as he spoke with an extremely excited expression. "Who is it?" The people around him cried out in surprise and looked at him. "Young God." The old man's pupils shrank as he said those two words with a trembling voice. Then he was completely stunned. "Young God." The expressions of the people around him changed. They were all stunned, not knowing who the old man was talking about. "Young God." Although Nyetian was very far away from the old man, he still heard the old man's words. His eyes trembled slightly as the corners of his mouth twitched. He said another 2 words, Sword Emperor, Young God Sword Emperor. When he thought of this name, Nietion's face froze, as if he had been petrified. He had heard this name from Morishire. At that time, the latter had said 16 words, transcend yin and yang, become one with the world, there is no sword in the world. I am the sword. These 16 words were the true unity of man and sword that Morishire had mentioned. According to Morishire, there had only been one person who had truly achieved these 16 words in the vast world of martial arts since ancient times. Chapter 41:18. Nietion looked at the white-clothed martial artist, his eyes trembling. The shock in his heart was indescribable. Was the number one person in the heavens who had become one with the sword really this person? Morishire had once said that the young God Sword Emperor had defeated the 9 great experts of the world with a single sword strike. After that, he had never appeared again. The fate of the young God Sword Emperor had always been a mystery. Some people said that the young God Sword Emperor had fallen, while others said that the young God Sword Emperor had shattered the void and transcended the world. But who would have thought that the young God Sword Emperor would actually return? The young God Sword Emperor was a martial artist born with a sword embryo. The sword embryo was born in the body, and the martial body was the sword body. Yu Jingshan was the same as him. However, the sword embryo in Yu Jingshan's body had been sealed when he was young. Later on, Xiao Wanjie had injured his Yuan meridian, causing the sword embryo to mutate and explode. After being treated, it had stabilized and was still in a coma. A natural sword embryo was 1 in a billion, and it was even rarer for it to mutate and survive. Before Yu Jingshan's sword embryo had mutated, it was possible for him to catch up to the young God Sword Emperor. After the sword embryo mutated, he was undoubtedly even more terrifying. As long as he didn't die, his future achievements would definitely not be inferior to the young God Sword Emperor. If that person is the young God Sword Emperor, then who is that ghost face? A moment later, Nietion became cold. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the terrifying ghost face. He couldn't help but feel his soul tremble, as if he had fallen into an endless abyss. The ghost face was from the same generation as the young God Sword Emperor, and from his tone, he didn't seem to be afraid of the young God Sword Emperor. Instead, he was very arrogant. From the looks of it, the ghost face's strength shouldn't be any weaker than the young God Sword Emperor. The young God Sword Emperor truly lives up to his name. Just as everyone was bewildered, the ghost face spoke. His deep voice was like thunder, and the dark aura rumbled endlessly, as if it wanted to devour the world. His aura was as majestic as the sea, as if there was a 10,000 feet tall, dark demon god in the void. Under the intimidation of the demon image, the sword intent in the void slightly weakened. The two of them had yet to clash, but the collision of their auras had already begun. Moreover, in terms of aura, the ghost face was not the slightest bit weaker than the young God Sword Emperor. It really is the young God Sword Emperor. Nietion's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in his heart. Although he had already guessed the identity of the white-robed cultivator, he was still shocked when he confirmed it. The Sun God Sword Emperor, the god of swords, the number one cultivator in the heavens, he's still alive. Exclamations of astonishment could be heard from the crowd. However, there were only a few of these exclamations. Most of the people were dumbfounded, not knowing who the Sun God Sword Emperor was. This was not strange. After all, the era of the young God Sword Emperor was far earlier than the current era. Not many people knew of the existence of the young God Sword Emperor. However, the strength displayed by the young God Sword Emperor was unquestionable, especially his sword intent. It was as if there was nothing in the world that he could not break. Eightfold Heavenly Lord, you have lived up to your name as the defiant demon. At that moment, the young God Sword Emperor spoke in a deep voice. Suddenly, the sword intent around his body surged and was released. Countless sword shadows shot out like the sun, dispersing the darkness. In the blink of an eye, the sword shadows condensed into 9 sword shadows, standing outside the young god sword emperor's figure like a strange mountain. This! Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. They all cried out in surprise, and their expressions became dull once again. The sword shadows outside the young god sword emperor's body were like towering mountains. Each sword shadow contained an incomparably huge power. Sword formation. Nietion's eyes suddenly narrowed as he exclaimed in his heart. How could he not see that the sword shadows released by the young god sword emperor were a huge sword formation? Xiaoyang, after so many years, your temper hasn't changed at all. You're still so womanly. Eightfold Heavenly Lord, who was known as the Defiant Demon, said in a deep voice. Suddenly, the power of darkness surged like a tide, its power able to swallow the sky. So the name of the young god sword emperor was Xiaoyang. Li Yuan, I defeated you back then, and I could defeat you now. The young god sword emperor smiled coldly, and then took a step forward. Then, the 9 sword shadows outside his body moved and spread out in an instant. They were like 9 pillars that reached the sky, guarding the 9 palaces of vast cloud sacred city. In the blink of an eye, Nietion felt that the aura of the surrounding space had changed. It made him feel extremely strong pressure, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. But the next moment, he immediately understood and exclaimed, the young god sword emperor is stabilizing the entire vast cloud sacred city and guarding the power of heaven and earth. That's right. The 9 sword shadows were a sword formation that directly enveloped the entire vast cloud sacred city and fixed the power of heaven and earth in the entire city. It was obvious that the young god sword emperor didn't want to cause more casualties, so he used the sword formation to stabilize vast cloud sacred city. At this moment, Nietion felt that the surrounding space seemed to be frozen. The power of heaven and earth was unmoving and incomparably calm. But at this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded and said nervously, if these 2 guys fight to the death, I'm afraid the entire sword formation won't be able to stabilize at all. Then what should we do? Nietion's eyes trembled in horror, and he exclaimed in shock. Of course, he knew that the martial artists of the sky martial saint ancestor level all had the power to destroy a territory. Obviously, the young god sword emperor and the 8 symbols heavenly lord obviously couldn't be compared with the martial artists of the sky martial saint ancestor level. Such terrifying 2 people probably didn't just destroy vast cloud sacred city, but the entire Southern Glory sacred world. The Southern Glory sacred world was a top sacred world in the all-heaven sacred world. Its importance was self-evident. If the Southern Glory sacred world was destroyed, the entire all-heaven sacred world would probably be affected, and there might even be the danger of destruction. Thinking of this, Nietion couldn't help but tremble, and his hair stood on end. Back then, my 8 symbols only had 7 symbols, and I could still take 3 of your sword strikes. The inverse demon Li Yuan said in a deep voice, now that my 8 symbols have reached the transcendent realm, can your swords still hurt me? As soon as he finished speaking, the terrifying ghost face trembled slightly. It turned out to be 1 giving birth to 2, 2 giving birth to 4, for giving birth to 8, turning into 8 ghost faces. What was even more strange was that the 8 ghost faces actually grew on 1 head, and each face was different. The similarity was that they were all extremely ferocious, and it made people shudder. Oh, the complete 8 symbols of the inverse god? Looking at the terrifying ghost face, the young god sword emperor's eyes lit up, and he seemed extremely excited. He laughed and said, I, Xiaoyang, have been invincible since I was 200 years old. Back then when I fought with you, you were the only one who could take 3 of my sword strikes. I saw that it wasn't easy for you to cultivate, and I wanted to leave an opponent for myself, so I didn't kill you. Now it seems that I made the right choice to keep you alive. Chapter 41:19. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, the dark energy soared into the sky, like layers upon layers of raging waves, one layer higher than the other, as if it wanted to break a hole in the clouds. Under the impact of the dark energy, the entire vast cloud sacred city actually shook, as if it was about to collapse. What? What kind of power is this? How can it be so terrifying? Everyone's faces were filled with shock as they cried out one after another. Many people frantically retreated, wanting to escape from the space-time, but they discovered that there was a powerful restraining force in the void, preventing them from breaking through. What a powerful aura! Nietion could feel the terrifying aura whizzing over his head from below. He couldn't help but frown, feeling shocked in his heart. The aura displayed by the defiant demon Li Yuan was too terrifying, even more terrifying than the Sun God Sword Emperor. He even suspected that the two of them had the power to destroy the sacred world. Qiaoyang attack. At this time, the defiant demon Li Yuan's defiant god 8 phases opened his mouth. Each of the 8 ghost faces was more terrifying than the last, and each was more ruthless than the last. He shouted, "Let me see if your Sun God Sword is still as sharp as before." The Sun God Sword Emperor stood coldly in the void, his white clothes fluttering like snow, his entire body's sword intent blazing like the sun, his face cold and murderous, his eyes surging with a chilling coldness. And in the next moment, an extremely strange scene appeared. Boom! The Sun God Sword Emperor's body suddenly ignited with blazing flames, and then his entire body began to change, slowly turning into a burning sword. The strange scene caused Nietion's heart to gasp in disbelief. The Sun God Sword Emperor's body had actually turned into a flaming sword. Was this the legendary true unity of man and sword? Nietion understood. His eyes trembled uncontrollably, and his heart jumped to his throat. To be able to see the true unity of man and sword unleash a sword, to him, this was something that would benefit him greatly. But at this time, he suddenly noticed something and suddenly let out a strange cry, and then discovered that his body was burning. Oh no! In the next moment, he immediately understood and shouted in fear. It turned out that his sword intent had been affected by the Yang God Sword Emperor's sword intent, and had actually become berserk, causing him to burn like the Yang God Sword Emperor. However, the Yang God Sword Emperor was already a swordsman who had become one with the sword, and he was still tens of thousands of miles away from this realm. If his sword intent went berserk, he would instantly turn into ashes. Nietion reacted immediately and tried to control the sword intent in his body. However, he was shocked to find that he couldn't control it at all. At this critical moment, a powerful sword will appeared and enveloped him, stabilizing his sword will in an instant. Senior Crimson Life. Nietion suddenly turned around, and he couldn't help but exclaim in pleasant surprise when he saw a stalwart figure standing behind him. Nietion, are you okay? Red Life Loyal Heart landed and asked nervously. I'm fine. Nietion's face was pale, but his aura was still stable. It was just that his injuries were too severe and his martial body was under too much pressure, so he urgently needed to rest. That's good. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart nodded slightly and left the arena with Nietion. They retreated to the edge of Vast Cloud City. Nietion, Qing Chi, Tang 13, and the others had also retreated to the edge. They were happy to see the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and Nietion. Nietion nodded slightly, but at this moment his mind was completely focused on the battle between the Yang God Sword Emperor and Li Yuan. He couldn't help but ask, Senior Crimson Life, has the Yang God Sword Emperor's sword intent already surpassed all the swordsmen in the All Heavens sacred world? The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was also a swordsman, so he naturally had the pride of the sword. He wouldn't easily admit that other swordsmen were stronger than him, but in the face of the Yang God Sword Emperor, there was only respect in his eyes. He nodded and said, Lord Yang God has been the strongest in the heavens for a long time. He has long been a legend. Even today, no one in the entire All Heavens sacred world can compare to him. Senior Crimson Life, have you seen the Yang God Sword Emperor before? Nietion's eyes trembled slightly, and he asked again. No. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart shook his head and said, but I heard Big Brother Dongwang mention this person, and a long time ago, Big Brother Dongwang was lucky enough to fight with this person, but unfortunately he was defeated. But at that time, Big Brother Dongwang was still young, and the path of martial arts had just begun. Later, when Big Brother Dongwang reached the peak of martial arts, Lord Yang God had already disappeared. It was a pity that Big Brother Dongwang couldn't really fight with Lord Yang God. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly. He didn't expect that Dongwang Zhengrong and the Yang Godsword Emperor had such a history. It was a pity that Dongwang Zhengrong and the Yang Godsword Emperor were born in different times. Otherwise, it would be difficult to predict the outcome of their battle. Senior Crimson Life, who do you think will win this battle? Then, Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and he asked with a burning face, Lord Yang God is the strongest in the heavens. I have never seen or heard of the dark warrior called Li Yuan, but his aura is not weaker than Lord Yang God's. So it's hard to say who will win this battle, the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart said solemnly. Of course, his strength couldn't be compared to the Yang God, Sword Emperor, and the defiant demon Li Yuan, but he could still sense the aura of the latter two. At least in terms of aura, Li Yuan, who had activated the rebelling god 8 phases, was not weaker than the Yang God Sword Emperor, and was even stronger than the Yang God. One is the strongest in the heavens, and the other is an unknown demon. The battle between these two can be said to be a battle of the ages. Qing Chi's eyes darkened slightly, and he said with a face full of shock, a battle of the ages. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he thought deeply. Boom! At this moment, a muffled explosion suddenly came from high up in the sky. The rebelling god 8 phases directly attacked, and a boundless dark claw appeared. It was as huge as the clouds in the sky, and it rolled down bigger than the entire vast cloud sacred city. Under the boundless sharp claw, the entire vast cloud sacred city shook, and the buildings and halls on the ground collapsed one after another. Even the ground was sinking. Everyone looked horrified, and the shock in their hearts couldn't be any greater. Such a palm was too terrifying. If it wasn't for the Yang God Sword Emperor's 9 sword shadows guarding vast cloud sacred city, the entire sacred city would be destroyed in an instant. Boom! Almost at the same time, the figure of the Yang God Sword Emperor moved, and the flames soared into the sky. Wherever they passed, the darkness was torn apart, and the flames directly turned the dark clouds into fire clouds. Boom! In the next moment, the palm and the sword collided, and there was a loud explosion. Heaven and earth shook, and then endless violent power spread out. Darkness and flames intertwined, and like a tsunami, it spread wildly in all directions. Chapter 41:20. Oh no! Nie Tian suddenly sensed the dark pressure and blazing flames rushing towards him. His expression immediately changed, and he exclaimed inwardly, those crazy waves were too terrifying. Even if it was just the remaining power, it would undoubtedly destroy any martial artist below sky martial divine ancestor. There were tens of millions of people present, including the people in Haoyan Sacred City. However, there were only a few who had reached sky martial divine ancestor realm. If that terrifying power spread, it would at least cause tens of millions of deaths and injuries. Retreat behind me. At the same time, Scarlet Life Loyal Heart reacted and roared. Suddenly, a majestic sword intent surged out of its body and formed a huge sword shield. Nie Tian and the others immediately retreated behind the sword shield. They were all shocked. With the strength of Scarlet Life Loyal Heart, it was not difficult to block the crazy waves. However, that was all it could do. It could barely protect Nie Tian and the others. It was impossible to save more people. At this time, everyone came back to their senses and were in complete chaos. They shouted and shouted one after another, starting to run wildly in all directions. But they could not rush out of vast cloud sacred city. At the moment of life and death, an unexpected scene happened. Buzz! In the sky, there was a deep sword chime. Suddenly, a sword wave was transmitted and shook the earth. What is that sound? Everyone was shocked. They had no idea what was going on. Buzz! 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 Following that, sword hums rang out one after another, followed by waves of sword waves that formed an invisible sword shield in the void, enveloping everyone. Boom, boom, boom. The next moment, endless crazy waves fell, but they were blocked by the sword shield in the air. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment, and they were completely speechless. Did a deity descend from the sky to protect them? It's the nine sword shadows. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked up at the nine sword projections that were floating high up in the sky like wondrous mountain peaks. It turned out that the sword cries came from the nine sword shadows. The nine sword shadows were the sword formation that Sun God Sword Emperor had set up in advance to stabilize the space-time and protect everyone. It seemed like the young God Sword Emperor had already expected this scene, which was why he had prepared it in advance. What a great young God Sword Emperor, as expected of the number one person in the heavens. The Scarlet Life, Dan Hart's eyes released a bright light, and he suddenly laughed out loud. He looked at the Sun God Sword Emperor with even more reverence in his eyes. In his entire life, he only respected one person, and that was Dongwang Zhengrong. But from now on, there was one more person he respected, and that was the young God Sword Emperor. Nietion's eyes trembled, and his heart was filled with shock. Not only was the young God Sword Emperor extremely powerful, he was also benevolent and righteous. This was why he was worthy of the title of number one in the heavens. Something's wrong. Look, right at this moment, Qing noticed something and cried out in shock. The faces of Nietion and the others changed. They suddenly discovered that cracks had appeared on the nine sword shadows, and the cracks were continuously expanding. It was obvious that the sword formation had received a huge impact and was starting to crack. Oh no, if this sword formation can't hold on, we'll be the first to suffer. The Scarlet Life, Dan Hart's eyes darkened, and he said in horror, if the sword formation is destroyed, I'm afraid Vast Cloud Sacred City will not be able to hold on, and even the entire Southern Brilliance Sacred Domain will collapse. Qing's face was gloomy, and his eyes kept flickering. The sword formation can't hold on, we're finished. The others reacted and shouted in panic, falling into chaos again. At the same time, the battle between fire and darkness continued high up in the sky. The young God Sword Emperor stood coldly in the void, and he had already returned to his human form. His eyes were gloomy, and his gaze swept across the sword formation. He didn't expect that the defiant demon Li Yuan's strength would improve so much, far exceeding his expectations. Qiu Yang, your sword formation can stop me in the past, but it can't stop me today. The defiant demon Li Yuan said in a low voice, and he was extremely arrogant. Cracks had actually appeared on the sword array in just one move. The sword array will be destroyed in, at most, 2 more moves. Li Yuan, are you really going to do everything for that thing? Aren't you afraid of destroying the entire Southern Brilliance Sacred Domain? The young God Sword Emperor said in a low voice, and his eyes were cold. I don't care about a mere Southern Brilliance Sacred Domain. Li Yuan shouted and laughed. Qiu Yang, you are indeed worthy of the title of the strongest person in the heavens. Unfortunately, you have a greatest weakness, and that is that you are too soft-hearted. Do you think that they will be grateful to you for saving these ants? Towards you, the most they can do is worship, and what they worship is not you as a person, but your power. If others have the same terrifying power as you, they will also worship you. This world is like this. The strong are high and mighty, and the weak are like ants. The young God Sword Emperor frowned, and his eyes were trembling slightly. Qiu Yang, I once tried to break the void, but I never succeeded. Then Li Yuan's voice sounded again, and he shouted, today our battle will definitely stimulate the greatest potential of the defiant God 8 symbols. In addition to the power of your sword principle, you will definitely be able to break the void. Let's join forces. Perhaps we can open a whole new world. The young God Sword Emperor's face was gloomy, and he said coldly, if the price is the destruction of this world, then there's no need for such a new world. Ha ha ha. Li Yuan laughed wildly and said, Qiu Yang, you are still so stubborn. It's a pity that you can no longer control today's battle. Is that so? The young God Sword Emperor's eyes darkened, and he took a step forward. Immediately, flames burst out from his body, turning into layers of flame waves that surged into the nine sword shadows. In the blink of an eye, the nine sword shadows recovered, and their aura was even stronger than before, and the power of the formation was even greater. The young God Sword Emperor is protecting us. Everyone felt the change in the aura of the nine sword intense, and they couldn't help but shout in ecstasy. With the protection of the young God Sword Emperor, they were naturally not afraid. Lord Young God's strength is on par with that defiant demon. He suddenly split out so many sword intents to stabilize the sword formation. Will he still be a match for that guy? The Scarlet Life Dan Hart had a face full of worry as he looked at the Sword Emperor from afar and said, "At this moment, we can only choose to believe in Lord Yang God's strength." Qing Chi frowned and said solemnly. On the other side, the deans of the 5 academies were stunned. They had never thought that the enemy drawn out by that thing would be so terrifying. Fortunately, the young God Sword Emperor had appeared today. Otherwise, the 5 academies would have welcomed the end of the world. Xiao Yang, even for you, it would be very difficult to maintain such a large sword formation. High up in the sky, the defiant God 8 symbols laughed wildly and said, "I want to see how much power you have left." Chapter 41:21. Boom! High up in the sky, a fiery sword will exploded. The terrifying power spread in all directions, causing the void to shake. Wherever the terrifying sword will pass, the void shook. The power of darkness was torn apart, and the heavens and the earth shook. Qiaoyang, if your sword is only like this, then I'm very disappointed. However, the huge ghost face laughed wildly. Then, endless darkness gathered and condensed into a pitch-black tower in the void, smashing towards the sun god, Sword Emperor. In the next moment, the tower of darkness fell and covered the sun god, Sword Emperor. Suddenly, the flames disappeared and darkness enveloped the entire Haoyun sacred city like a tide. Sun god, Sword Emperor, did you lose just like that? Everyone was shrouded in darkness and panicked. Many people began to shout. The sun god, Sword Emperor, whom they relied on, was defeated just like that. They were caught unprepared. Now that the sun god, Sword Emperor was defeated, all of them would face a disaster. That was the most terrifying thing. Break! Just when everyone was in despair, an explosion suddenly rang out from within the Tower of Darkness. Immediately, a flaming sword broke out of the tower, and then the entire tower shattered. The aura of darkness instantly weakened, and the aura of flames surged out, forming a sea of fire in the sky above Haoyun Square. Sun God, Sword Emperor. When everyone saw the sword of fire standing in the sky, their eyes trembled and they all exclaimed, "Sun God Sword Emperor is indeed the strongest person in the heavens. Even with the damage of his sword will, he is still not weaker than that guy." Scarlet Life, Loyal Heart's eyes trembled. Although he said that, he was very worried. How could he not see that although the Sun God Sword Emperor had shown great power, he was actually under the control of the defiant demon Li Yuan? Ha ha ha! Seeing the Sun God Sword Emperor break out of the tower, the defiant demon Li Yuan did not panic at all. Instead, he laughed wildly. "This is the Sun God Sword Emperor I know. Today, let us fight to our heart's content." As the sound of his voice faded, the terrifying, ghostly face began to sway in the void. Immediately, a dark aura surged into the sky like a giant black snake. The terrifying aura surged into the void, causing huge cracks to appear in the space. It was like a ravine on the ground. Just who is this guy? How can he be so powerful? Qing Chi's eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but exclaim. He sensed an unusually terrifying aura from Li Yuan's body, but this aura was very strange. Although it gave off a strong feeling of darkness, it was fundamentally different from the darkness attribute of the 9 Yuan. Furthermore, this aura was not derived from the 9 elemental aura. It seemed to be a power that should not exist in this world. Could this be? Hearing Qing Chi's words, Nie Tian seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed slightly, and he let out a cry of shock. Then his entire body froze. Eyebrows furrowed. Qing-Chi looked at Nietian and asked, "Nietian, what did you see?" Nigun. Nietian's eyes flickered as he uttered a name. Nigun. When Qing-Chi heard these three words, his eyes trembled in shock. His aura changed, and his face became sluggish. He had never thought that this kind of power really existed. Could it be the original Terminator? Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was stunned for a moment and said in horror, "Brother Scarlet Life, you also know about it?" Qing-Chi was stunned again. "I also met him in the territory. At that time, someone came to capture Nietian. It seemed that he wanted some kind of power in his body." Scarlet Life Loyal Heart recalled the scene and said, "If I remember correctly, that person's name was Feng Mo by Ming. At that time, Tian Sha was also there. The name Nigun was from him." "Yes." Nietian nodded. Of course, he remembered this. At that time in the territory, he used the 9th level Chaos Beast to attract Nigun's Black Root. That person was called Feng Mo by Ming. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and Tian Sha joined forces and barely defeated that guy. "Brother Scarlet Life, what is Nigun?" Qing-Chi asked nervously. According to Tian Sha, in addition to the 9 primes, there is also Nigun, which is the opposite of the 9 primes. Nigun is born against heaven and earth. It is the opposite of the 9 primes, the dark side of heaven and earth. The power condensed by Nigun is the power of Nigun. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart's face was gloomy. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart said, "Nigun's organization is Nigun, known as the original Terminator." Nietian glanced at Scarlet Life Loyal Heart and added, "Nigun, the original Terminator. I didn't expect this organization to really exist." Qing-Chi's eyes trembled as he said, "Senior Qing-Chi, you know about the Nigun Blackroot?" Nietian looked at Qing-Chi and asked, his eyes slightly trembling. Nigun was the organization that had been looking for the 9th level Chaos Beast. It seemed that Qing-Chi had a certain understanding of Nigun. Qing-Chi's face was gloomy. He first nodded, then shook his head. "I don't know much about this organization. I only heard about it from Lord Dongwang." There was a period of time when Lord Dongwang was inexplicably irritated. He faintly sensed that in the All Heavens sacred world, there was a very terrifying power, the power to destroy the world. After that, Lord Dongwang sent people to investigate and finally found some clues. He learned that at the beginning of the world, there was an organization called Nigun, known as the Terminators. But because Nigun existed a long time ago, and then Nigun suddenly disappeared, very few people know about this organization. Later, Lord Dongwang prepared to personally go to where Nigun used to be to investigate. But before he could do so, he unfortunately fell. With that, Qing-Chi's face became solemn, obviously recalling something. "Senior Qing-Chi, do you know where Nigun is?" Nietian's eyes trembled as he couldn't help but ask. "I don't know." Qing-Chi shook his head. "Everything about Nigun is too dangerous. Lord Dongwang doesn't let us know. Since Tian Sha has a certain understanding of Nigun, then the person who investigated Nigun for Lord Dongwang should be him." "Yes." The Scarlet Life Dan Hart nodded solemnly. Nietian frowned. He had wanted to have a chance to see where Nigun was, but now it seemed that it was necessary to look for Tian Sha. Chapter 41-22. Reverse Emperor. When Nietian and Scarlet Life Loyal Heart heard Qing-Chi's words, their eyes trembled at the same time. It seemed that Qing-Chi's understanding of Nigun Hagen was not just a little. Nietian faintly felt that Qing-Chi should be hiding something and was not willing to say it. Scarlet Life Loyal Heart didn't think so much, but his eyes were trembling, as if he still had a lingering fear. Fortunately, the person who went to capture Nietian was Demon Sealing Pimming, not Li Yuan. If Li Yuan appeared in person, even if he joined forces with Tian Sha, they would not be able to stop him. When Yetion's 9 extreme chaos beast appeared, it did not alarm Li Yuan, but this time, Li Yuan appeared in person, which was enough to show the importance of that thing. Reverse Emperor appeared in person. It seems that Ni Yuan Hagen is determined to get that thing. Qing Chi's eyes trembled slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "Is the Southern Huang sacred world really unable to escape this disaster?" Qing Chi, your perception is stronger. Do you think Lord Yang God can stop Li Yuan? Scarlet Life Loyal Heart turned slightly and asked in a deep voice. The two are really neck and neck. Under normal circumstances, the chance of winning should be 50-50. But now, Qing Chi's face darkened slightly, and he did not finish the rest of the sentence. Yang Godsword Emperor has to divide a lot of power to maintain the stability of vast Cloud Sacred City, so his chance of winning is much smaller. How could Yetion not know what Qing Chi was going to say? And he frowned and said, "If only we could help Lord Yang God, but unfortunately, our power is too weak, and we can't help him at all." Scarlet Life Loyal Heart sighed, looking helpless. When Qing Chi heard this, his eyes flickered, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. Bang! At this moment, a powerful collision occurred in the sky. The flames collided with the endless darkness, and instantly, a terrifying force exploded. Huge waves surged into the sky, wreaking havoc. It was like an endless beast of darkness, wanting to devour everything. Bang! 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 Following that, a terrifying wave of chi spread out, and the 9 sword shadows were unable to withstand it. One by one, they shattered. As the sword chi spread out, the aura of darkness also weakened a lot. The young god, Sword Emperor, stabilized himself and revealed his human form once again. He looked at the defiant demon Li Yuan and growled, "Li Yuan, must you destroy this saint's world? I don't care about a mere sacred world." The ghostly face laughed wildly. "What I care about are the 9 seals of origin." The young god Sword Emperor's eyes darkened, as if he was thinking about something. Li Yuan's strength had exceeded his expectations. If the battle continued, the sword formation wouldn't be able to withstand it at all. At that time, not only would everyone present in Vast Cloud Sacred City be in danger, but the entire Southern Brilliant Sacred World and even the entire All-Heaven Sacred World would be in danger. If that moment came, it would truly be troublesome. That would truly be the doomsday of billions of living beings. Xiaoyang, if you can't bear to do it, you might as well give me the 9 seals of origin. Anyway, it's useless for you guys to have it. Li Yuan seemed to have seen through the young god, Sword Monarch's thoughts, and sneered. Don't even think about it. Xiaoyang's expression changed. His eyes were filled with determination as he growled. Li Yuan, with me here, you won't be able to destroy this saint's world today, and you won't be able to take away the 9 seals of origin. After saying this, he took a step forward and unleashed a terrifying aura of blood from his body. The fiery aura on his body turned violent and surged in all directions. At that moment, the power of darkness seemed to have sensed the threat and began to retreat. Burning his blood chi, Yetion couldn't help but exclaim when he saw this scene. The young Godsword Emperor didn't hesitate to burn his blood chi in order to fight against Li Yuan. So desperate. Li Yuan sneered and said, "Xiaoyang, you're already so old, yet you still want to burn your blood chi. Looks like you don't want to live anymore. I, Xiaoyang, have dominated the world. What's there to be afraid of if you die?" Xiaoyang growled. The flame aura soared into the sky and forcefully suppressed the darkness. "Ha ha ha!" Li Yuan laughed even more crazily and shouted, "Since you want to play, I'll play with you to the end." As soon as he finished speaking, the terrifying ghost faces changed. Black chi soared into the sky, and the ghost faces became even more ferocious. Giant black horns appeared on their heads, making them look like demons. Xiaoyang immediately sensed an unusual aura in the void. His expression suddenly changed, and he said in surprise, "Your 8 divine symbols have reached such a level." "Ha!" Li Yuan laughed wildly again and said arrogantly, "It turns out that the young God Sword Emperor, who is known as the strongest person in the heavens, also has times when he is afraid. After saying that, the 8 divine symbols moved. Like a mountain of darkness, it suddenly fell down and pressed down on Qiuyang. Qiuyang's eyes darkened slightly. At that moment, he had an illusion that the sky above his head was collapsing. At the same time, everyone felt a sense of suffocation. Many of the weaker martial artists directly vomited blood, and their faces became extremely pale. Even if the heavens and earth collapse, I, Qiuyang, am willing to be the pillar that holds up the heavens. At that moment, the young god Sword Emperor roared, and the god of swords displayed his invincible power. He became one with his sword, and his sword intent soared into the sky. Suddenly, a huge sword intent was released and resisted the darkness of the heavens and earth. The young god Sword Emperor is the strongest. The shocking scene caused Nietian's eyes to tremble, and he shouted. Qiuyang was willing to sacrifice everything for the heavens and earth. This was the demeanor of the strongest person. Boom! At that moment, 2 extremely terrifying forces collided. Suddenly, the heavens and earth shook. Then, a terrifying wave that could be seen with the naked eye appeared. Wherever it passed, the void was directly torn apart. It's over. Everyone could feel the destructive power contained in the wave. Their eyes trembled and they cried out in horror. Buzz! 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 At that moment, the sound of swords rang out again. Suddenly, an invisible sword shield appeared to protect everyone. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, endless sounds of explosions rang out and the heavens and earth shook. Oh no, the sword formation can't take it anymore. Nietian's eyes swept over the 9 sword shadows. His eyes could not help but tremble, and he cried out in fear. Bang, bang, bang. Just at this moment, cracking sounds came from the 9 sword images. The 9 sword images were on the verge of collapse, and it looked like they were about to collapse. Boom! At the moment of life and death, a terrifying wave suddenly came from the ground. Then, an endless power of the formation appeared and instantly enveloped the 9 sword shadows. The sword formation was stabilized and began to slowly recover. Senior Qing Chi. Nietian was suddenly stunned. Then, he immediately reacted and looked at Qing Chi beside him. Qing Chi was covered in cold sweat, but he squeezed out a smile and said, "Fortunately, it was almost too late." Chapter 41-23. Qing Chi activated the protective formation of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. It enveloped the 9 sword shadows and forcefully stabilized the sword formation. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly as he was deeply shocked. He knew about the protective formation of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. He had entered the Myriad Yuan Pavilion many times before and had sensed how terrifying the protective formation was. It was no exaggeration to say that the protective formation of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion made the Myriad Yuan Pavilion the safest place in the entire all-heaven sacred world. The battle between the Sun God Sword Emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan had affected Vast Cloud's sacred city. Almost all the buildings on the ground had been razed to the ground, and even the ground had cracked as if it had just experienced a super earthquake. However, the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was like a boulder in a storm. It did not budge at all. Boom! However, in the next moment, a terrifying rumble came from the ground, and the entire Myriad Yuan Pavilion collapsed. Nietian, the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart, and the others were shocked. They could not help but look at Qing Chi. The Myriad Yuan Pavilion can be rebuilt. If the Southern Brilliant Sacred World is gone, then it's really over. Qing Chi smiled bitterly, but his eyes were filled with extreme determination. Nietian nodded. Qing Chi's decision to abandon the Myriad Yuan Pavilion to protect the sword formation was indeed wise. If he did not do this, when Vast Cloud's sacred city was destroyed, how could a small Myriad Yuan Pavilion survive alone, even with the existence of the protective array? Young God Sword Emperor, leave the protection of Vast Cloud City to me. You just have to go all out and fight. After that, a wisp of a smile curled up on the corners of Qing Chi's mouth, and then he said loudly, "Where are the disciples of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion?" "Yes, Yes, yes. As soon as he finished speaking, a series of responses rang out. Hundreds of figures appeared and came to Qing Chi's side. Tian and the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart looked at each other suspiciously. They did not know what Qing Chi was going to do. Find all the formation points. Qing Chi glanced at the people around him and said solemnly, "Yes." Hundreds of array experts responded in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. Then they moved and instantly marked out the formation points in the formation. I understand. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart immediately understood and laughed. You want all of us to stand on the formation points and use everyone's strength to stabilize the entire formation. That's right. Qing Chi nodded and said, Brother Qi Ming, please call the 5 deans here. Without them, I'm afraid these martial artists won't listen to me. Okay, the essence of Red Life replied. Moments later, he found the 5 deans. Grandmaster Qing Chi, what should we do next? Please instruct us. Zhuge Qiyun was smart enough to figure out what Qing Chi wanted to do. Man or head, Zhuge. I have already marked out all the formation points of the formation. Among them, there are 18 strong formation points, 108 large formation points, 1,008 medium formation points, and 10,008 small formation points. Qing Chi looked at Zhuge Qiyun and said, Man or head, Zhuge, please order people to stand guard at each formation point. The strong point requires a Sky Martial Saint Ancestor Peak level martial artist. The large point requires a Sky Martial Saint Ancestor Elite. The medium point requires a Heaven Sense Holy Emperor Elite. And the small point requires a Heaven Tribulation Holy King Elite. Yes. Zhuge Qiyun nodded heavily. He turned around and said to the 4 deans behind him, Everyone, this incident was instigated by our 5 academies. It concerns the safety of the Southern Brilliance Sacred World and the All-Heaven Sacred World. Please put aside the differences between academies for now and work together to save the Southern Brilliance Sacred World. Unity. The 4 deans were moved and responded in unison. Unity is strength. Unity is strength. Unity is strength. Suddenly, the martial artists in the sky above Vast Cloud, Sacred City, shouted in unison. Their voices were like a tsunami that shook the world. Okay, seeing this scene, Zhuge Qiyun's eyes couldn't help but heat up. Immediately after, he let out a low roar, and his figure moved, steadily standing on top of the strongest formation point. Upon seeing this, the other 4 deans immediately moved and landed on the 4 strong formation points. Following that, figures appeared from the void and landed on the formation points. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, the rumbling sound of the formation was heard in the void. Each sound was louder than the one before. The aura was vigorous and surging. The power of the formation skyrocketed, and the surrounding void began to recover rapidly. Senior Qing Chi, you're really amazing. Tian was excited. He could not help but look at Qing Chi and said in surprise. However, Qing Chi's expression was very ugly at that moment. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Although he was trying his best to maintain a dangerous appearance, the trembling in his eyes showed that he was in great pain. Senior, are you all right? Tian's expression changed. He immediately became nervous, not knowing what was going on. I'm fine. Qing Chi forced a smile and did not say much. It turned out that when the protective formation of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was built, there were several hidden subsidiary formation eyes in addition to the main formation eye. Qing Chi himself was one of the subsidiary formation eyes. At that moment, the greater the force that the protective formation endured, the greater the pressure on his body. Qing Chi was proficient in the formation Tao, but his strength was not strong. It was a little difficult for him to endure such great pressure. However, at this time, he could only hold on, because if he fell, it would affect the stability of the entire protective formation. At the same time, high up in the sky, the battle between the flames and the darkness continued. The explosive power was incomparably violent, sweeping everything. After a while, the darkness and flames gradually separated, and the figures of the Sun God, Sword Emperor, and Li Yuan reappeared. The sun god, Sword Emperor, returned to his human form. His gaze swept across the surroundings. When he saw the warriors in the formation, he could not help but smile. If he only relied on his sword formation, he would not be able to maintain the stability of space-time. However, if he added the formation in front of him, it would be more or less the same. These ants are a little interesting. Li Yuan's 8 ghost faces looked at the tens of thousands of warriors around him, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed and said, "This is good too. We can fight to our heart's content." After space-time stabilized, the sun god Sword Emperor did not need to worry about anything else. He only needed to focus on the battle. In Li Yuan's eyes, defeating a sun god Sword Emperor who could not fight with all his strength did not give him any sense of accomplishment. He wanted to defeat the sun god Sword Emperor in his complete state. Only then would he be able to break the legend of the sun god Sword Emperor's #1 figure. Then let's do it. The sun god Sword Emperor's eyes were blazing like fire. His battle intent was intense, and the flames on his body surged into the sky. They actually spread out into clouds of fire that instantly spread out, as if they wanted to devour the darkness in front of them. Chapter 41:24. 8 symbols destroy the heavens. Rebel demon Li Yuan used the ultimate move of the 8 symbols. The power of the 8 symbols' heavenly lord was revealed. The wind and clouds surged, and the earth shook. This guy's strength is so terrifying. Everyone could feel the impact coming from the array. Their eyes trembled, and their hearts were filled with shock. Li Yuan's strength alone had caused the array to shake. His strength was so terrifying that it had reached an unimaginable level. The array was being supported by tens of thousands of martial artists. Among them, there were more than 100 Sky Martial Saint Ancestor-level powerhouses. This was equivalent to so many powerhouses working together to resist Li Yuan, but still seemed to be unable to withstand it. Looking at Li Yuan, Nie Tian sensed the fluctuations coming from the grand spell formation and couldn't be more shocked. This man is so strong that it makes my hair stand on end. He saw that some of the weaker martial artists in the array were vomiting blood. One could imagine how strong Li Yuan was. Very good. The flames around the young god, Sword Emperor's body, churned like a sea of fire. Feeling the power of the 8 phases, he laughed wildly and shouted, "Let me experience just how strong the complete 8 phases of the god defying 8 phases is." Then, his body turned into a flaming sword again. Suddenly, a sword aura was released. Under the surging sword essence, it resisted the dark force in the void. The inverse god, 9 symbols, was the opposite of the 9 symbols. Its aura was even more violent than the dark force of the 9 symbols. With the addition of the inverse god, 8 symbols, it seemed to have the power to devour the sky. Evil. At this time, one of the 8 symbols of Li Yuan roared. Suddenly, a gust of black air whizzed out, and the evil symbol appeared. It was extremely fierce and rushed toward the sun god, Sword Emperor. Evil. Roar. Devour. Kill. Lock. Madness. Explode. Almost at the same time, the other 7 symbols roared violently. The evil symbol, the roaring symbol, the devouring symbol, the killing symbol, the locking symbol, the mad symbol, and the violent symbol appeared at the same time. Terrifying aura surged out, and the power of darkness covered the sky. Boom. Kill everything, annihilate everything. Boom. The moment the 8 symbols appeared, a visible dark wave appeared and spread wildly in all directions. With the power to devour the sky and destroy the earth, it bombarded the array. Everyone, hold your ground. Qing Chi's eyes trembled as he saw this, and he shouted. Everyone felt the incoming pressure, and their expressions changed. Many of them were so frightened that they retreated and gave up the array point they were at. Oh no! Qing Chi screamed in fright when he saw this scene. His face turned pale. If the formation points could not withstand it, the formation patterns would definitely collapse. At that time, it will be impossible to repair the formation. Everyone listen up. Guard the formation points. Anyone who dares to move will be killed by the 5 academies. At this critical moment, Zhuge Qiyun roared like thunder, intimidating everyone. Many people wanted to retreat, but after being scared by Zhuge Qiyun, they didn't dare to move. Bang! Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, a terrifying power descended. Suddenly, the void trembled, and the entire array shook. Then, there was a continuous sound of explosions. The array patterns directly collapsed, and the warriors who left the array point were directly bombarded to death by the shattered array patterns. On the other hand, the cultivators who had been guarding the formation points had only suffered some minor injuries from the impact, but they were not seriously affected. Then, the force of the impact of the array gradually stabilized. Not bad, not bad. Qingqi glanced at the array. Only a small part of the array patterns was destroyed, and it did not affect the entire framework of the array. He breathed a sigh of relief, and his tense face relaxed. Senior Qingqi, are you okay? Tian looked at Qingqi and asked nervously. I'm fine. Only then did Qingqi realize that he was injured. His mouth and nose were bleeding, but after wiping away the blood, he smiled faintly, indicating that he was fine. Tian, however, frowned. Qingqi was clearly holding on with all his might. He could see that Qingqi seemed to be one with the array. If the array was damaged, Qingqi would not be able to escape. Sword, flames turn into sun, 9 suns in the sky. At this moment, the Sun God Sword Emperor made his move. A low roar pierced the clouds and rocks, tearing the darkness. Suddenly, flames condensed in the void, turning into 9 sun-like fireballs. A blazing aura spread out, resisting the 8 divine symbols. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the 8 divine symbols and the 9 suns collided, and the sound of explosions was endless. This was the battle between the inverse yuan and the flames, the impact of the sword and the symbols, and the collision of good and evil. Chi chi chi, bang bang bang, boom boom boom. High up in the sky, the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. Heaven and earth trembled, and space-time exploded. Everyone was also affected, especially the warriors in the array. Many of the weaker ones were injured. Their power is too terrifying. Tian looked at the chaotic void. He could no longer see the figures of the Sun God, Sword Emperor, and the inverse demon Li Yuan. He was shocked. Previously, he had some doubts. Did the Sun God, Sword Emperor, and the inverse demon Li Yuan really have the ability to destroy a sacred world? But now he was convinced. If it was not for the protection of the array, the entire Southern Brilliant Sacred World would have collapsed. The power of the array, together with the power of tens of thousands of experts, was only able to block the impact of the battle between the two. The strength of the two was evident. After a long time, the chaotic void gradually became clear. The figure of the Sun God, Sword Emperor, appeared in front of everyone, and at the same time, the terrifying 8 divine symbols appeared. However, at this moment, the Sun God, Sword Emperor's face was slightly pale. There were several wounds on his body, and they were dirty black. Obviously, his injuries were not light. The inverse demon Li Yuan used the power of the 9 elements. Even someone as strong as the Sun God Sword Emperor could not recover instantly after being injured. On the other hand, the 8 divine symbols were much weaker than before, and the dark aura was no longer as violent. It was obvious that both of them had been injured in the battle just now. Qiaoyang, you are indeed the strongest person in the heavens. You can actually resist my 8 divine symbols destroy the heavens. The inverse demon Li Yuan said in a low voice. Then he sneered and said, but you can hold on. Can those ants hold on? The Sun God Sword Emperor's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. He had already noticed that the protective array was starting to crack. Many warriors were injured. If he and Li Yuan continued to fight, the protective array would not be able to hold on. Boom! At this moment, the protective array suddenly trembled strangely, as if it had been hit by some kind of attack. The expressions of the Sun God Sword Emperor and the inverse demon Li Yuan changed at the same time. They sensed that someone had broken through the array and rushed in. On the other side, Tian's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly sensed a strange aura that made his 9 dragon veins inexplicably restless. Chapter 41:25 Great Void Universe Journey of the Giant Dragon. The scene of the awakening of the mark of the ancestral dragon suddenly appeared in Tian's mind. He could not help but be stunned. He had never thought that such a scene would appear so strangely at this moment. When this scene first appeared, it was when he was confirmed to be a dragon shepherd. Just now, he had felt a strange aura that made his dragon vein inexplicably agitated. Could that aura be related to his dragon vein and his identity as a dragon shepherd? Previously, he had used the dragon shepherd chi to attract 3 terrifying black dragons. Fortunately, the scarlet life loyal heart and the heavenly ferocious chi had appeared to deal with the 3 black dragons. According to old ancestor wombing, the 3 black dragons were called the Black Dragon Trio. The person behind them was the number 1 taboo of the dragon clan, Karma Su. Karma Su was the number 1 taboo of the dragon clan. Even old ancestor wombing would be very nervous and even panicked when he mentioned this person. Rumor had it that Karma Su was the only dragon clan martial artist with 10 marks of the ancestral dragon. At his peak, Karma Su's strength had already surpassed that of a true ancestral dragon. One should know that as a dragon shepherd, Tian only had 9 marks of the ancestral dragon. Karma Su used his own strength to ascend to the supreme position of the dragon clan and become the dragon emperor. However, his ambition was too great. He wanted to lead the dragon clan to devour other races, which led to the ancient world war. It was also after that war that the dragon clan weakened. Karma Su became a taboo and was sealed in the primordial dragon domain. It was said that Karma Su did not give up. He was waiting for a person whose prophecy had been passed down in the dragon clan for thousands of years, a dragon shepherd. When Karma Su awoke from the ice, the dragon clan would be faced with a disaster. After old ancestor wombing confirmed that Tian was a dragon shepherd, he was very worried that the latter's appearance would awaken Karma Su. The appearance of the Black Dragon Trio later confirmed his worries. After temporarily settling the Black Dragon Trio, old ancestor wombing gave Tian the glory of the dragon clan's ancestral dragon mark that had been accumulated for countless years. The so-called glory of the ancestral dragon mark was the power of runes inscribed by the ancestral dragon mark. The ancestral dragon mark was formed by the soul of an ancestral dragon martial artist who possessed the mark of the ancestral dragon after his death. In the end, the glory of the ancestral dragon was gathered in a book called the Ancestral Dragon Compendium, which was kept by Tian. As long as Tian absorbed the glory of the ancestral dragon ancestor dragon mark, he would be able to conceal the dragon ancestor unique aura, dragon god. However, dragon god, glory god, god dragon, ancestor dragon, could only it, dragon god, dragon it, and could only interfere dragon god, he could not. During the hidden dragon struggle, Tian had used the dragon farmer chi many times. Even though the ancestral dragon streak had concealed it, the resonance of his aura had been so strong that it had alarmed the imperial karma ruins. At this moment, images of the journey to the great dragon of the void universe appeared in his mind. There was only one explanation, and that was that the Emperor Karma ruins had appeared. When the Black Dragon Triad had first appeared, he hadn't had such a strong reaction. Now, the dragon vein in him was stirring. The mark of the ancestral dragon had awakened. That meant that Emperor of God Dong Khan had come. Just as Tian was feeling bewildered, he suddenly sensed something. He looked up into the sky and saw a white-robed figure appear out of nowhere. In an instant, the white-robed figure tore through the void. He was high up in the sky, standing side by side with the young God-Sword Emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan. He was dressed in white. His long hair flew in the wind. His face was exquisite, like an ice sculpture. His figure wasn't big, but as he stood there, he was like a strange peak that made the world around him seem small. A mysterious dragon chi surged outside his body. It was faintly discernible, like the ripples in a lake. It was gentle, but contained terrifying power. The most powerful thing about him was his aura. Just by standing there, he seemed to be able to change the world. In the void, his aura clashed with the young god sword emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan. It was not weaker, an expert. The young god sword emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan looked at the newcomer. They could tell that the newcomer was an expert of the same level as them. In this world, apart from them, there was actually such an expert. It was unbelievable. At that moment, everyone was stunned. Their gazes were focused on the white-robed figure. The shock in their hearts was written perfectly on their faces. No one knew how the white-robed martial artist had entered the array. It was too strange. How is this possible? Qing-Chi looked at the person. His eyes trembled in disbelief. The guardian array was already very terrifying. Even a peak sky martial arts divine ancestor would find it difficult to break through. Now that there were so many martial artists supporting it, it would be extremely difficult to break through the array. But the white-robed martial artist had entered the array without anyone noticing. It was too strange. It seemed that to the white-robed martial artist, the guardian array was useless. Could it be that this person was stronger than the young god sword emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan? I came for you. At that moment, the white-robed martial artist spoke. His eyes were cold and sharp. They flashed with an evil light as they locked onto Nye Tian. He said word by word, "Dragon Shepherd." His voice was very cold and unstable. At the same time, there was a hint of sickness in it. But it was this kind of sick voice that gave people a strong sense of oppression. It made Nye Tian feel that there was an invisible hand that was tightly gripping his neck, almost suffocating him. At that moment, the aura of heaven and earth around them changed. The white-robed figure's every move caused the wind and clouds to churn. It forcefully weakened the auras of the young god sword emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan. The three of them formed a tripod in the sky. This guy is very strong. The young god sword emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan felt the pressure at the same time. The former's expression changed, while the latter's inverse god 8 phases moved at the same time. For the first time, he panicked. The person's strength was not any weaker than theirs. This made the two of them very worried. They did not know the person. They subconsciously thought that the person was a helper that the other party had invited. However, that person didn't pay any attention to them after arriving, and instead focused all of his attention on Nye Tian, which surprised him greatly. Defiant demon Li Yuan was worried that the person had come for that thing. He did not expect that the person had come for Nye Tian.